Call the work session to order for April 17, 2023. Everybody's here on the table. We have one item on the agenda tonight. It's great time again. To answer any questions. First item is the city manager's recommended 2024.
Tonight presenting the fiscal year 2024 recommended budget. It continues to be an exciting time in Goodyear. This recommended budget supports growth within the same conservative fiscal policies adopted by Council that have allowed us to continue a prolonged period of economic uncertainty. It includes no tax increases and recommends new staffing to grow our public safety operations, ensure our city is maintained to the high standards You'll see recommended funding to the community, brand new city hall, as well as transportation projects and improvement plan. I want to thank all of our staff for their partnership. Discussion. For this important discussion, adoption of the budget is arguably the most important decision you as elected officials make for our community. So
as most of you know, the budget, like Annette said, to Annette and the city manager's office. I'm pleased to present to you 9. We're going to take a brief look at the economy to help set the is in compliance with our financial policy, which will be formally adopted by Council next month. We'll give an overview of the citywide and general fund revenues and expenditures, focusing primarily on the revenue side of things, which provides the framework for what we can spend throughout the fiscal year. And we'll spend a good amount of time talking through our supplemental recommendations and 5-year capital improvement program to close the evening. I do want to mention really quickly, we do have a couple spots questions. So starting with the economy. And that is from an economic standpoint. If you look at the top where it says inflation, supply chain, labor availability, material costs, and housing, that's a copy and paste from last year's budget from an economic standpoint. We are not forecasting a recession in any way. I want to make that clear, despite what you might be seeing in the news. Revenues in Goodyear are still strong and show growth on a year-over-year basis, as well as compared to our adopted budget. However, our margin for error is definitely getting smaller. I think the last bullet point on the slide in front of you really summarizes our outlook very well, as revenue is still growing, but at a slower pace. Looking at permitting activity, fiscal year 2024, we expect to see a lot of what we've already seen in fiscal year 2023. On the top left, you look at our single-family permits. They've been down. We expect those to stay down in 2024. Were this good year of several years ago, that would be really bad news for growth in the city. However, we are no longer just a bedroom city, and you can see from a multifamily permit standpoint, we expect to permit a lot of multifamily homes moving forward. That's been very consistent for the past several years. And on the industrial side, we also anticipate seeing growth specifically related to what we've had in fiscal year 2023. So all of these different charts, in my mind, pretty much show that a city that's growing and is no longer just a bedroom city. We're growing into that well-rounded city that we've been striving for so long. Looking at financial policies, I do want to point out on this slide, some of the slides that you will see in the top right corner have a page number on them. Last year we did this and council thought it was helpful. It's referencing the budget books that you guys have all been given. So if it makes sense to look at a page in the budget book, you're more than welcome to do so, and it will be referenced on the slides that you're seeing in front of you. So all of our financial policies can be found in those budget books that were distributed to council, and we actually just posted our city manager's recommended budget online, so they're on our website as well. And again, the recommended budget as presented complies with all of our currently adopted policies. A few highlights of our financial policies include ongoing expenses are paid for with ongoing revenues. $6.5 million of construction sales tax is recognized as ongoing. That was decided from our council retreat back in February. Where available, restricted funds are used prior to general funds. Contingency enterprise fund. Enterprise funds are self-sufficient as presented, and that includes the purchase of long-term storage credits utilizing construction sales tax. And we have a combined property tax rate that we've maintained below $1.74. We maximize our property tax levy. So as Wynette said, there are no increases recommended in this budget. No tax increases, sorry. Similar to how we've done in the past, we're going to start with where the money comes from, and we're going to look at the total budget, not just the general fund. When we go that includes the general fund, I'll make sure and call it out. So based on the chart you see in front of you, fund balance makes up the largest source of funding for our 2024 budget. It was the same thing in fiscal year 2023. We'll go around each slice of the pie. More than the accumulation of operating, think of it kind of like equity. On the chart in front of you, you'll see the general fund have the ability to control where we put dollars on. Trust, capital, enterprise funds, debt service, and special revenue are all restricted. Sales tax. Fiscal year 2024. This shows both tax. The non-construction is in the blue and the construction is in the red. 100% of the bars, 6.5 million of that per policy hits ongoing. It's our one-time fund, and then the remainder goes in our conservatism and our sales tax. Look at the green line connecting from fiscal year 2019 all the way through 2028. 1% normalized growth year over year. However, looking specifically at 2019, our actuals the construction sales tax side, we're forecasting for 2024 $23.5 million, and that would be our lowest collection since 2019 if you look backwards to your left. Looking at state shared revenues, they make up about 9% of our sources. and that comes in at about $55.7 million. I want to note that our 23 received from the Arizona Towns data, which means we have to is you tax, state sales tax, and HERF. The first three of those all hit the general fund. HERF has its own fund and is subsidized by the general fund if need be. A good way to think about state shared revenues is the faster we grow in relation to all of our peer cities in the city, the bigger piece of the pie that we get. So growth is a good thing from this standpoint. And I also want to point out, looking at fiscal year 24, it looks a little bit like a rooftop there. We peak out in 2024 and we go backwards in 2025 and 2026. And that is specifically related to urban revenue sharing. And we have a slide where we want to talk about that. So, yes.
Sales tax, I mean, not state sales, income tax.
That is correct, yes. So starting in calendar year 2023, because we file taxes on calendar year, the flat tax in Arizona went into effect.
Okay.
So what the state did to try to hold the cities harmless was, instead of the cities getting 15% of the distributions of the collections, they're now going to get 18%. However, we're going to get that 18% before we actually receive the reduced amount from the state. So it shows a little peak in 2024 and 2025, so it's a timing issue. So what we've decided to do is take those two little peaks. If you see the purple spots at the top, we're going to cut those off out of ongoing, and we're going to put them into our one-time funds, so we have a more normalized growth and we don't over-allocate ourselves for the next couple of years. That amount that we're moving into one time is about $7.5 million in fiscal year 24, and it'll be about $3.5 million in fiscal year 25. Continuing to move around, we look at property taxes for $24.5 million. Historically, we collect about 98% of what we levy. And as you can see, the blue bars are what our levies are historically. So that is representative to me of a city that's growing and has homes that are appreciating in value. So that's a good thing. What you can also see on there is the rate. So property taxes have both a primary and a secondary rate component. The primary component hits the general fund. We have the ability to spend those funds as we deem. And the secondary component of that hits debt service, to where voter authorized general obligation bond debt service is paid to. So our combined rate is at $1.74, $1.75, and you can see that stayed consistent since 2018. That means we have not changed our rate here at the City of Goodyear since 2018.
Question for you. When you have a levy, the blue bar?
Yes.
$2, what does that represent?
So that's on the rate side. So that's related to the red line on the right, and the dollars you're seeing on the left in millions is related to the blue bars.
It's millions. Is that what that is?
So 25 million, yes, is where we're topping out at 2024 on the levy. But if you're looking at it from the rate side, you can see the $1.75 on the right and the $2, that's what you're talking about. That relates to the red line in the rate.
Okay.
So even though property taxes make up a relatively small portion of our city's revenues, it's something that citizens typically have a lot of questions on. So the chart that we put in the middle here shows our fiscal year 23 levy at about $22.5 million. Shows our fiscal year 24 levy at just under $25 million. And you can see that rate is the same, $1.73.5 or $1.735, both in 23 and 24. And what that means is that an average Goodyear home with $100,000 in property value, and we're talking taxable value, not resale value, would pay $173.50 to the City of Goodyear. Now, in fiscal year 24, the average assessed value, so taxable value of a single-family home in Goodyear, is around $219,000 of taxable value, which means that the average Goodyear resident will pay $380 in property taxes to the City of Goodyear. And I know what everybody's thinking is, my tax bill is a lot higher than that, right? So where does everything else go? Well, the majority of property tax bills go to education, as well as Maricopa County, and then special assessment districts. What City of Goodyear collects is actually a small fraction of your property tax bills. Moving on to enterprise funds.
I'm just suggesting that, we have the good, I think this is probably statute when you talk about Goodyear property tax, $100,000 home. It'd probably be more realistic if you put a number in there on what the average home is in there, so that anybody who's looking at that slide, they'll go, 100,000, it ain't, you know what I mean? So just a little more realistic. I know that's probably statute, isn't it, the 100,000?
We'll put that in there for our tentative budget,
Okay.
as well as we typically, I think last year we did a dollar bill that shows the fraction that
Okay.
actually goes to Goodyear versus every other.
Yeah, I think it's more
funding source.
realistic, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to be clear, because I think a lot of people also get confused, our citizens, when we talk about how this is spread out. The legislature put a limit on the assessed valuations, right, of your house.
Your house, yes, there is a statutory limit to how much your house can increase year over year.
But if I sell my house to Bill, he doesn't get that same, it comes in at what he bought it for, right, when they reassess it?
I don't have my CPA hat on here.
Or does it stay?
But you would pay, that would be something you would discuss with your tax advisor on
Well,
what your,
No,
I
no,
think is
I
what you're
guess what I'm
saying.
meaning is the assessment.
Assessed value.
Sorry.
The assessment goes, so new builds, in a way, are gonna pay a higher tax because they aren't limited to that 2% increase.
5%.
5% increase, so they're not limited. So there's a lot of confusion, I think, with some of the citizens who have just bought their house, not understanding why their tax bill is different from Bill, who might have owned his house for 20 years. And is it just worth just as much? So I think that's one thing I think that we need to help explain to the citizens.
Sure,
Because
yes.
they see a higher tax bill than their neighbor, and they're like, well, we live in the same model, why is mine higher than his?
Yes, so when we're putting together our property tax calculations, the new builds are not subjected to the same numbers that the existing ones are. Yes, you're correct. So,
Did that make sense? I'm sorry if I.
No, but that was perfect.
yes, so.
And one thing we will do to verify is if a resale happens, does the resale get reapportioned at that time, reassessed at that time, or does it maintain at the 5% annual increase?
Yeah, that
I'll
would be
verify
interesting.
that, yeah.
I wasn't sure how that worked, so if that's, because when you start seeing these tax bills and people see our dollar, then they start saying, well, mine's different than this a lot, and so you start getting all the little Twitter feed stuff, so thank you.
Exactly.
No, thank you. I think I talked all around that one. Didn't answer your question. I apologize, so. All right, so we are looking at enterprise fees now. So they make up about 10% of our total sources in the budget. They're their own funds, nothing to do with the general fund. So for all enterprise funds, we're tracking very closely to what our 23 revised budget numbers are. For fiscal year 24 and beyond in our forecast, all of our revenue numbers factor in population growth as well as current rates that we have. And then we forecasted a slight rate increase starting in fiscal year 26 when our current rates expire at the end of fiscal year 25. And then last but not least, you can see in the kind of the bottom left, we've made our way all the way around. So the remaining 25%, this is kind of our catch-all category, but these are some specific revenues that we typically talk about each year or that of interest to people. So impact fees and development agreements. So we have a development agreement forecasted for 24 for Rainbow Valley Water Reclamation Facility. That's 32 million of that 52 million that you're seeing. The remainder are development impact fees. So when we build in the city, developers pay an impact fee that helps us with our growth. And that's about $20.5 million that we're projecting for 24, which is flat with what we have in our estimates for 2023. We also include CFDs and trusts in our budget, as well as bond proceeds. So this $40 million in bond proceeds has to do with our GO bond election that we'll be going out for in November. So should that election be successful and we want to utilize some of that new funding, we'll have the dollars in the budget to allow us to move forward on some of those projects. And last but not least, we have recreation and parks fees. So a part of that is for our ballpark. We had our first full season in several years now, which was nice. And our revenues are coming right in line with our estimates at about $3.5 million. And then on the rec center side, we're forecasting flat revenues going into next year. We don't have any more promotions going on, I wouldn't say the newness is wearing off per se, but as we continue to grow, it'll be more tepid, or, more stable, steady. Thank you very much, revenue going forward. So there we go. Last but not least on there, franchise fees. This is a good one that shows our growth as well. We have a question?
Go ahead.
Sorry.
I just had a question about the impact fees.
Yes.
Because last time we talked, they were between 20 and 50%. Isn't that what we talked about? Did we get those down, or do we have that figured out yet?
I know Jared is still working through those, and I believe in the next month you will be hearing from him about.
we're still working on
We're
those?
still working on it. They've
Okay.
not been finalized,
Right.
correct?
Question for you, is it going to be coming down the road, or, and I'll just wait till that's the case, what our debt service, the general fund pays for the ballpark, and what is the general fund subsidy of the ballpark? Is that going to come in a presentation, or can you answer that now? Just
I know
curious.
the general fund subsidy for the ballpark is around $15 million this year.
That's
so-
the debt service plus?
That
short-
is, yes, that is everything.
That's debt service, which is what, 9, 10 million?
Debt service is approximately $10 million.
Okay, so you're looking at what, 5 million?
Correct.
On operating? Okay,
Yep.
all right.
On the debt service side? Yes. Yes, yes, that is, we take that into account each year, correct?
And we just get a little of that, I assume, right now, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. A morsel, yes, okay, go ahead. I'm just curious, I didn't realize the general fund operating was that large. I thought it was still 2 to 3 million, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the last piece here on franchise fees. So we're projecting $4.3 million next year. We're seeing double-digit growth in the franchise fees. So when we get businesses coming to town, they pay in those franchise fees to us. So we're projecting about half of that increase. 10% increase is what we're seeing. We're projecting about half of that in our budget next year. So that was the high level of the entire budget, right? So now we can kind of zoom in just a little bit on the general fund. The good news is we've covered a lot of these already by looking at the total budget, right? So if you look at fund balance, the blue 33%, we talked about that, where it comes from. Sales tax, we talked about our sales tax and what portion hits the general fund, all of the non-construction sales tax and a portion of the construction. We talked about state shared revenues already and how a portion of that we're putting to one time for the flat tax. We talked about property taxes already. So the only one we really haven't talked about are the user fees and fines, and that is made up, we've actually partially talked about that because those franchise fees are made up in that number, as well as our development-related revenue. So our DSD department, whatever it costs to run that department on an ongoing basis, we project 100% cost recovery from a revenue side in fees that we're going to receive. Also lumped in there to a smaller extent are business license renewals, liquor licenses, and other city fees and fines.
How much in fines do we typically have?
I don't know fines off the top of my head. We typically report them lumped together, but we can get that back to you. It's
Curious.
all of them together, it's about $1.5 million, so I don't know this fines portion of that $1.5 million.
Yeah, I was just curious. Like, I assume it can't be a lot, but 6%, I was just curious. All right, thanks.
Yep. So sticking with the general fund, again, just a different way to look at it, the ongoing and the one-time side, right? So on the ongoing side, we're projecting $171 million. So you look at our general fund as a whole, that is only a 2.5% increase on the ongoing side versus what we received in fiscal year 2022 actuals. So over a 2-year period, we're only showing a 2.5% increase on the ongoing side. That's, I would say, a very conservative number, factors in all the economic uncertainty that we're seeing, but that's why we're doing what we're doing there. And you can see sales tax, when we talk about food tax, when we talk about residential rental, that big red slice of the pie there, that's exactly what we'd be talking about, were those funding sources to go away. And then on the one-time side of things, anything not used gets programmed from the previous year into fund balance. That's our one-time state shared revenues in purple on the right, and then our construction sales tax. So that is pretty much everything that we have from a revenue side in our budget for fiscal year 2024. This was probably a good time to stop. Are there any additional questions anybody has?
Any questions? Okay?
All
Go
right.
ahead.
So that was where does the money come from? Now let's look a little bit about where does the money go. So the budget we're presented, like we started off with, $581.9 million. For context, last year, during our city manager's recommended budget, we presented a budget of $480.4 million. So when adjusted for carryovers, contingency, and budget authority, that's about a 10.5% increase versus our revised budget, apples to apples. And I want to make sure and point out that that 10.5% increase that you're seeing includes all supplemental requests, it includes all capital improvement projects, it includes all increases to existing staff. So that's an all-in number that you're seeing on the 10.5 year over year. And then if you look at the general fund, so total budget, narrow down a little bit to the general fund. You can see on the left side here, public safety, again, the impact that public safety has on the general fund. And then on the right side, you can see these numbers are very similar to what we had last year. So just think similar pie, larger numbers, but similar percentage breakdown on where we're spending our money. Operations makes up 61%. It was right around 60% last year. CIP makes up 23%. It was right around 23% last year as well. When you see operations in the general fund, think personnel. Most of our people get paid out of the general fund in that operations bucket. So out of the $259.1 million total in the general fund, about 43% of that spend is personnel related. And speaking of personnel, this is our first look at our proposed additions for fiscal year 2024. So in this budget, we're proposing adding just under 41 FTEs. Compared to last year's budget, we approved 67 FTEs. So this 41 FTE increase is a 4.5% increase, and that is the lowest percent increase of FTEs in the past 5 years. I know there's some other things about PD staffing we'll get into in a little bit, but even if we factor all that in, it's still going to be one of the lowest FTE asks in the past 5 years. I know we also love looking at FTEs per 1,000. So just wanted to put that in there. For fiscal year 22, we topped out at around 9.01 FTEs per 1,000. Last year's budget, everything in, we were at 8.89. We're staying right consistent with that at 8.91 this year.
I have a question.
Yes.
So if we're growing so fast and we're growing so much bigger, why are we not adding more people? Because obviously we're asking our employees to do the same amount of work when we were smaller.
So I think the FTEs per 1,000 actually gives us a good year-over-year look at how we're staying consistent with that growth. However, as part of the budget process, all the department directors have had their chance to say this is what we need, this is what we're okay with, and they've signed off on the FTE additions that we have in this budget, and they're comfortable with it for at least another year.
So then they won't come back next year and say, whoa, wait, we need 150 more people.
I don't know about 150, but they might definitely come back next year. But for the next 365 days, they've said they're good and they can operate that way.
Maybe
So,
149. Yeah. Go ahead.
So we're doing the police study on personnel study. If that comes back that we need more people, that would just fall into the next budget then, right? It wouldn't come out of this, or?
we actually are setting aside dollars this year in this
Okay.
year's budget for that.
So we could start on that. If it says we need like 2 more squads, we could start
Correct.
phasing it. Okay, thank you.
Correct. Yes.
And that's all in the vote for 30 in here.
Yes. Yep.
So
Anything
we've
else?
got we've got the money set aside, and then also the full-time equivalent counts would go up as well. So that would be in addition to that number that you see.
Correct. So the slide that's in front of you is for existing personnel. So this is what we're proposing for non-represented staff. It's a 7.5% market adjustment and a 2.5% one-time payout. For police and fire represented, those are all per the adopted MOUs. Council has already seen those numbers. We believe that these proposed changes continue to keep us competitive in attracting talent versus our peer cities, as well as maintain internal equity between both our represented and our non-represented staff. Under the citywide benefit enhancements, we're increasing our deferred compensation match from 1% to 2%. That one and the longevity have an asterisk next to it, and that's because those are already offered by PD and Fire. That's something we're now just offering to the rest of the non-represented staff. Everything else below that is going to be new for all staff. And then I do want to point out at the very bottom there that we put budget availability per our council retreat back in February. We have budget available in our health trust fund for retirement health care. That was a topic that was brought up. So I know I've spoke with HR and we've identified an actuarial. We've got a couple different options that we're in the process of costing out. So over the next couple months, you'll likely have a presentation from them on the results of that, and council will likely get to make a decision on whether they'd like to move forward or not. The good news is if it's not right at the beginning of the fiscal year, we can backdate that effective as of the fiscal year. So if you don't get the presentation as of July 1, it'll be coming. We want to make sure we have everything together before we present numbers.
If you would also please include in your presentation Mesa and any other city that has that benefit, so we can compare what we're looking to propose to what some of the other cities that we compete against are doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
First of all, thank you for that, because I know we brought that up in our small group too, about the insurance. The other issue that we brought up in our small group was I asked you about the maternity, paternity coverage, like what Phoenix is covering above and beyond FMLA. I know some of the cities are going that way. Do we have any idea about that, or is that something, I'm looking at Lyman over there.
Whoa.
Yes.
I'm afraid to, since the small groups, we're going to regroup here and look at some of those additional suggestions that, like that, paternity leave. So I have not had a chance to talk to Lyman yet on that.
Sorry, Lyman.
Yep.
And this is, so the budget availability for the health insurance trust fund? So that's still, we're still evaluating all the options, all the choices, how much is even available, and things like that. So
Correct.
that'll come back to us before the budget,
Yes.
to decide if we want to move
It
forward
won't
with it or
be,
not.
it likely won't come to you before we adopt this budget, but the dollars will be in the budget to be able to implement it in '24, should we decide to move forward with it.
Okay, it'll be set aside, or at least to look at it. If we need to execute on it, we'll have the resources to potentially do it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Bill?
So we're, based on the small group meetings that the entire council didn't get a chance to participate in, we're going to have, you're going to have internal conversations about adding things or not adding things to the budget going forward?
We would bring those back to you before any decisions are made, but there were suggestions made on paternity leave on that particular item.
Are there others, I guess, is the question then?
I don't recall. There was one by Councilmember Campbell about a front desk position, but that was about it. Oh, the squat rack, we're working on that separately. Yeah.
I brought that out in front of all of us when we had our meeting with them.
Yeah.
But I have not had any meetings with anybody on any staff or anyone.
Right, so that was the three of us that heard your suggestion. And then three other people heard Sherry's suggestion, and we all have not had any discussion on a strategic level, on a tactical level, on any level about whether these are good or not. So I'm just trying to figure out where we're at in this process, that's all.
Not, we won't bring anything forward unless we've had the chance to discuss it as a group.
Okay. Go ahead.
So this slide is a good way to summarize everything kind of that we talked about in the general fund. So revenues and transfers in on the left side, on the ongoing side of things, $179 million. Transfers in make up about $9 million of that, and that is our enterprise funds paying for administrative support from the rest of the city, as well as in lieu property taxes. So about $170 million of ongoing revenues we're projecting. Base budget, subtract that from that. That's the cost of doing exactly what we did last year. Ongoing supplementals, that's what we're going to get into in just a little bit. When you see ongoing supplementals, think people, think FTEs, $4.7 million. We talked about the PD staffing study. That's the 2 million right there on the ongoing side. So were the staffing study to say that we need additional officers, we'd have the dollars in the budget to do so. And then transfers out. So the general fund not only has to be self-sufficient, but it subsidizes other funds for the city. A big part of that is ballpark, which we talked about, which is about half that. So $15 million of that 30 goes to subsidizing the ballpark. Another big chunk of that is our asset management, so replacing capital that we already have at the city. That's about 12 million. And the remainder is split between basically HERF and our ambulance funds going forward. But that's what the general fund helps support for the rest of the city. And then on the one-time side, we talked about beginning balance. So dollars that we didn't use last year get plugged into the one-time side of things. There are no transfers in actually on the one-time side. That is all of our revenue, construction, sales tax, and our one-time state shared sitting over there. Capital projects, the question might come up, why is there $5 million in the base budget on the one-time side? And that is related to our one-time retention payouts that we're doing this year. We don't typically have those, but we do this particular year. One-time supplementals, one-time related to the PD staffing study, so that's for the vehicles, PP&E, that type of stuff. And our policy reserve, so 15% of our ongoing revenues is sitting over there. What that leaves us with is about $12 million that we plug into our CIP reserve, and that is to fund future years of the CIP. So it's left over for this year per se, but it gets factored into our 5-year forecast. So were we to not use those dollars or use those for something else, something would have to fall out of our CIP likely. So per financial policy, we prepare a general fund forecast showing that we're solvent over the next 5 years based on currently available resources. This is just us showing that, and as we've spoken with council, the numbers that you're seeing here on the resource side are very unchanged from what you saw in February at the retreat. Not only do we put together a 5-year forecast for the general fund, but we also do so for our enterprise funds. So this slide shows only the operational expenditures for our water fund. And what we would ideally like to see here is a gap between our sources and our uses, so a gap between the green and the red line. And that would represent operational surplus, which would allow us to spend on capital projects. Because we have very little surplus forecasted, this is where we're utilizing our construction sales tax fund to purchase long-term storage credits to give the water fund the necessary cash to move forward with capital projects over the next couple of years.
So just back up there for a second, if you would. That shortfall that we had discussed earlier on the enterprise fund, how's that being funded? Is that the construction sales tax
Yes.
you just mentioned?
Correct.
Okay. So that's just money that may go to capital, but can't go to capital because it's covering that, correct?
It's what we need to be able to fund those capital projects for the water fund.
For the
Yes.
water fund itself?
Correct.
Okay. Gotcha.
I've got a question. What steps are we taking now so we don't have this again? What are y'all doing differently?
So we're in the process of relooking at a rate study. So on basically the revenue side of things, we're doing great. On the expenditure side, the rate study didn't take into account several of the capital projects that we need from an ongoing basis. So our new rate study that we're in the process of going through will make sure that we do not miss anything for sure. Also, we're looking at our revenues, I would say 6 or 7 different ways we're analyzing them. We've actually spent some money on some tools in the finance department that help us dive into the detail and understand the detail to a more granular level to ensure that if something were to go wrong, we make sure that it's brought to the appropriate level of attention immediately and we can take corrective action right away.
All right, is there any thought of raising the rates again? Is it time for them to be raised next year?
That's one of the things that we're doing we brought in Wildan Financial, who's going through and redoing the rate study for us. And what we'll do is, in part of that, we'll come back to council with some what-ifs on what would it mean if we raised the rates earlier than what is currently planned, or what if we wait until 2026 when the current rate study ends. The sooner you raise rates, the smaller incremental difference is needed to raise the money. So we're going to be looking at that and coming back to council with some different what-ifs on that.
Okay, thank you.
So this is the same thing except for our wastewater fund. This is ideally what we would like to see in our water fund, is that gap there. You can see that's our cushion. That's where the capital project spend comes, with that margin right there. And then our last enterprise fund that we have in the city is solid waste. So again, you're seeing a fairly small gap here. However, I want you to note, not only are we dealing with much smaller numbers than we are in the water fund here in the solid waste fund, but our capital needs to sustain the solid waste fund are very minimal, if anything. So there are no capital needs, said differently, for the solid waste fund.
I have one more question. Sorry, do you recall how long our contract goes with Republic? We won't be renewing it this year, will we?
No, it was a 7-year contract, and I believe we're in year 3
or
of
4?
that contract,
Okay, great,
correct?
okay, thank you.
So are there any questions here? That's the where does the money come from, where does the money go? The next piece of the presentation will be diving into supplementals by department. Good?
Go ahead.
We'll continue. So this is a breakdown of our proposed supplemental additions for fiscal year '24. It's $15.7 million. Last year, we approved $18.6 million. On the one-time side, it's very similar to what we did last year, right around $9 or $10 million. On the ongoing side, that's where you're seeing the difference, because fewer FTEs being recommended, or fewer dollars on the ongoing side that you're seeing proposed there. The FTE count for the enterprise funds includes a utility locator and a utility technician. We'll get into the details of those. HERF and ballpark, those relate to 3 streets workers and an ITS technician, which are all in the HERF fund. And then the other bucket, everybody wants to know what's in the other bucket. So most of that relates to our microtransit phase 2 program, as well as the dollars for our current PD squad in the budget for their vehicles that get funded out of development impact fees.
What's the status of our street sweeper?
Our street sweeper position, or?
No, the addition?
The
Are we going
machine.
to get another street sweeper?
Last year we added a street sweeper in the budget, and they are out doing their thing. So I know we actually got a grant funding for an additional street sweeping machine.
Yes.
And that one is in process right now, and I don't know if council's seen the actual proposal or not on that, but we got one funded through grants, yes, just recently. I think Winnett has
They
additional
were made
information
aware of
on
it
that.
through the manager's memo, that
Okay,
we
thank you.
received the grant, so it's just in the process.
Okay.
Thank you.
So how many street sweepers do we have? 2 now? We only had 1.
Machines or people?
Both, I mean, with the machine, I mean, we don't have a guy with a broom. He's got to be in the machine.
We have 6 street sweeper machines. How many employees? 3 employees. 3 drivers.
So we have 6 vehicles with 3 drivers. Are we adding another driver?
Not in this budget, there's not one. Those vehicles have been known to, they're temperamental. So when they do break down, it's good to have ones in reserve so we don't get off schedule for what we're currently sweeping.
Kind of like council members.
I wasn't going to say that, Mayor.
I can't resist. I couldn't resist. Go ahead.
All right, so this is where we'll start looking at the supplementals by department. So on the slides in front of you, you'll see the supplementals recommended on the right side. We will continue unless any department has questions. We'll try to answer all the questions we can. If we can't, department directors will be here to help us out. We start with an easy one, mayor and council, because there are no supplementals being recommended. So if everybody's good there, we'll move on to the city manager's budget.
Just hold,
Who are the 7 authorized positions for the mayor? Who are we missing? No, us?
Yes,
Correct.
But this isn't staff, right?
No.
So where do we find this staff?
city manager's budget,
City manager's budget, okay,
yes.
okay.
go ahead.
So in the city manager's budget, there's 3 supplementals being recommended. Goodyear Cares Community Navigator, our mental health pilot program, and our home repair rehab program. So each one of those is utilizing our COVID response funds. So just to recap what that was, we received $10 million in ARPA funding several years ago, and we used those funds for an immediate need which freed up general fund dollars. And those general fund dollars are what we call our COVID response funds. Those COVID response funds have been utilized for programs exactly like we're seeing here, and this is actually the utilization of the remaining funds that we have. There was about $1.5 million that we did not use that were released back into the general fund. So these programs will continue utilizing the COVID response funds until they run out, at which point in time we'll decide whether it makes sense to continue with those programs.
Quick question. I know we had talked about some help additional for council at some point. Where's that out right now as we grow and council gets more active out there? Whoops. Is that you or
Yes,
me?
I don't know. Every time I turn on my mic, it does that. so- Yeah. Yes, we're in the process of evaluating that. That's something that we can go back to mayor and council, have a discussion on. I do have my city manager's contingency, but right now, working with staff, we are looking at our options.
Okay, because as we grow, like I say, council is getting more active out there.
Yes.
I'm fortunate enough, I got somebody that kind of makes sure I don't step in it. But you got 6 others that could use some help, and there's
Yeah.
only one individual covering that right now.
Yes.
So give it some serious thought to help them out on that.
Definitely.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Does the city manager contingency, does that auto refill that bucket every year? Okay, just want to verify, so we have that just in case something comes up.
Yes, and half of it is ongoing, half one time. So
That's
if
for
we
the
do, if we
sources.
do need to add a position and council supports that, we do have ongoing funds.
Yeah, I'm just curious, it comes in handy when
Mhm.
the council has a special need that's emergent from the public, so I just make sure it continues. I thought it did, but I just wanted to verify. Thank you.
So you asked me about when I shared with you that I had given Julie some of my budget requests. One of them was adding additional staff for the council office because John does an excellent job. But like the mayor said, I don't want to overuse him because there's 5, 6 other council members that need to use him. But I either turn down requests or I just don't do it because I can't do all that I've been asked to do without the staff helping. And John does a wonderful job, but we're working him to death.
Yeah. Thank
Well,
you.
maybe I shouldn't say that, not to death, but we're working him.
No, thank you. I appreciate
Yeah.
that feedback.
He's
Thank you.
great.
So you anticipate perhaps bringing this back before we're done with this? Is that what I'm hearing?
We can.
Well,
I haven't
I'm
got.
not asking for it, I guess, but
Yeah.
I'm just, we have the manager's budget this is what is being recommended. We're supposed to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to it, or what's going on. Now we're talking about adding employee benefit programs, we're talking about adding employees. Again, without any kind of global discussion, we talk about the need for council, support. Meanwhile, we have, so we have an intergov who is spending all session down at the legislature, leaving all of the other regional activities to be juggled, I guess is the best way to say that. So at what point do we look at a second intergov position? Most of the cities have at least 2, if not 3 of those. So, when we start talking about, well, I think this or I think that, this discussion just explodes. So, and I don't want to get into well, this one's more important than that one, because I think that's a horrible conversation to have as well. So I'm just trying to get some clarity, I guess, on what it is that we're doing. We're throwing a whole bunch of stuff up against the wall, and we're trying to see what sticks when you've already balanced this budget.
Yes.
So, I don't know, I'm just a little lost on that, from where
Well,
we're going.
What I would recommend, this is my recommended budget for this year. We have opportunities throughout the year to explore other options, be it intergov or be it council assistance. And so that is an opportunity for me to bring it back to mayor and council and have those discussions with you so everybody has a chance to weigh in on those. So right now, this is the budget that I'm recommending going forward, but I'm taking all of your suggestions and your thoughts, and we can come back at a later date and time and have those conversations with you, so everyone can participate.
I guess my point, and we had kind of a chuckle conversation about where's the strategy in all this? So I'm going to look at my peers and say, where's our strategic thought on this? How are we positioning ourselves? We're just saying, well, I want, I think, I need, and there's no strategy in that. We're spoiled kids at the table saying it's my turn or I want, and I think we got to bring this conversation up and have it in a different way besides just, mid-year, we're going to do a mid-year budget adjustment and everyone's going to get what they want. I don't know if that makes sense.
I would argue, hold on a second, that enough money has been set aside, whether it's for police to rehire, or if for some reason we have a future discussion outside this budget that says, you know what, the load for John's too high, we need some support there, or as a result of the intergov, I still think there's room, because it's not like you're going to have to dig for the money. The money has been set aside to cover that if so be needed. So I believe that you could still have this discussion later on if we find it's needed, because I personally think, and I don't know how all of us feel, that a second health for council is needed because of the demand of the job that some of them doing. I know Vicky's very busy out there. I know Wally's very busy out there. You have all of this, and you got one guy who's supposed to cover for 6. So it makes it very, very tenuous for him to do that. And I agree with you that Jenna's spending all the time down there because we've got a lot of people who I would say that aren't very friendly to us down there, trying to take advantage of local government down there. So so I think that's a further discussion. I agree strategically wise, but I hate to try to pick this one apart at this point because we have the money set aside later down the road to discuss it if we so choose.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Which one's more important?
yeah.
I don't know.
I don't until we have that discussion.
We need staff to
Yeah.
fix it.
Go ahead, one second. Vicky.
I agree with you 100%. Jenna is amazing. And even if she had an assistant or if she had something to help her down there, because she's getting hit every which way, and she's doing a lot of work for us, especially for you. So I think you're right about that. I think the idea is for us to work efficiently, to make sure that everything flows and flows smoothly. I know the one thing that we've had the problem with, and we've talked to Lynette about, is and not answering the phones. I got it again today. And I don't know what's going on, but I'm old school, and I don't like this 24-hour thing. In fact, I think it needs to be off the table. If you're at work and you're here during the week, you answer the phone every hour of every day that you are at your desk, because we have developers and different people that are calling and calling and calling, and they can't get anybody. And I know it's been said, well, if they get back to them in 24 hours, well, the truth is, something can happen in 24 hours. Developer misses out on something like that. So I think we have to think about that as a city and think not what's good for us, but what's good for the people out there that are making the phone calls to us that need answers right now. And my feeling is if you're at work during the day, you answer the phone. So maybe a receptionist is needed, maybe, but if we're so busy that we can't answer the phone, then I think, and get back to somebody in a decent timing, then I think we need a receptionist up there to answer the phone.
Thank you.
I don't know if Lynette wanted to answer that. Or,
I was just going to say thank you.
We've
I-
talked about it before, so.
I think there's a lot of good points there, and I think that's something I would like to see the city manager go back and look at how the intergov, how John's council assistant position is working. It's been the same amount of people since I started, almost 15 years ago?
Yes.
And our city has grown immensely since then, and we are more active than we were when I first started, with more committees, more stuff going on. John also does the youth commission, so I'm not sure what the plan would look like, what, it would be one position, two, but however, but I think it does need to be studied, and since we have the money set aside, I think that is the placeholder, that if we need it, I think that's good. But that's a conversation I think that you need to talk to your staff and figure out what is the best way to go and where they're feeling overwhelmed, and because there's both such wonderful people that they're going to say, oh, we're fine, but we also know that they're working their little tails off. So it's much appreciated how much work they do.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, very similar. So, I mean, I think we need to be strategic, like Bill was mentioning as well. So we need, because we can, from our own perspective, we can give you suggestions, but we really need to know what staff is actually, what the utilization rate is and how much capacity they really do have. Because if they, obviously their leaders are thinking that they're fine, or they would have hopefully brought that to us. The same thing with overtime and things like that. So we just need to know what that looks like so we can make a better informed decision as opposed to us just cognitively thinking that they look like they're overwhelmed. So,
Okay, thank you.
Next department is our legal services department. So there's 2 supplemental requests for FTEs and assistant city attorney, as well as a legal assistant position. Any questions specifically on those that we can answer?
Are these to be added to the staff they currently have? So they currently have 3 attorneys, counting our attorney, and they want to have 4?
2?
4.
Councilmember Campbell, yes, we currently have 4 attorneys on the civil side.
Oh, you have 4,
We
so
have
you
4.
want 5.
This will be 5th, and this will be dedicated to development services support.
Do you have room for them in your area?
Yes, we do.
Okay. I haven't seen their area, so I don't know.
Oh, you ought to go check it out.
You haven't come by,
I
you
have
should come
not
by.
seen it. I've not been there. Okay.
Go ahead.
Good, okay. Municipal court, another easy one, no recommended supplementals.
Did we complete all of the court enhancements that we had planned? We've had a number of construction projects go on over the course of a couple of years. Are they done? Are they about done?
There are some done, and there's the GMC remodel project that's currently underway and is in design, includes looking again at the court and any of the needs within the courthouse.
But the immediate, I'm going to call them the oh my God things we've got to fix now, those are all done, right?
I think they had some mandated changes they
Yeah,
they
that's
had
what I
to
mean.
do.
We had some that were, you got to get on these. And I just want to make sure that that's all done.
Yes, we got Smeet back there nodding, yes, those have all been completed.
And I'm looking at Crystal.
Mayor
Well,
and council, thank you.
We've had a little turmoil, so I just want to verify it.
We are awaiting the construction to be scheduled, and I believe the timeline is by the end of the calendar year. That's in the CIP temporary improvements in GMC. That's what you're referring to, correct?
Yeah, I think so. Because there
Yes.
was a whole list of, like the gates that were put up in the back.
Oh, yes,
and
that was
we had-
completed in a previous CIP.
Well, I know the gates were obviously, but.
Correct.
There was that whole list of things that was in that the security and all that.
Yes, that was all completed under our CIP project.
Okay,
Yeah, the temporary improvements are still scheduled for this calendar year.
okay,
Yes,
thanks.
thank you.
Hold on, right here. Wait, Crystal, don't go anywhere.
I don't know if this is for you or for the city manager, since we're obviously going to be getting a new judge who's going to be working with Crystal. Do we have some, I don't know how much is set aside if we discover that another position or something is going to be needed once we get the team on board? Is that something, or would that just have to wait probably till next year, since we're so far in it?
It would be at council's discretion and guidance there, because we do have the money set aside that we've got, right now in this budget. That would be in play there, so if that's council's direction.
So, okay, I just wonder if something comes up that we're like, oh, we need this, and, Crystal talks with the new judge, that they get on and they decide that we're going to do this program and we need this for this program. I just want to make sure we've got that flexibility. We don't set anyone up to fail or overwork, because the court staff's, I think, been through enough, so.
Right.
So are you,
Thank you.
just want to clarify, are you suggesting a second judge, or are you suggesting another staff member under Crystal then?
Not necessarily
Or
a judge.
resources or materials for
But
them?
they've been talking about different programs and different, courts, specialty courts. And because of all the upheaval there. I don't know if they have all the people that they would need for those courts once they get up. So I'm just saying, it's very hard to do this strategically at this point, like Bill would want, because this is very unknown until we get someone in place who would work with Crystal and that they could figure out what their needs were. I'm just saying if we have the ability, and Crystal's nodding there, so, you know, I know she's very flexible. I just want to make sure we have the flexibility to work with what is needed as it comes online, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. And again, it's that pot of money we've got set aside for multiple things right now that we'll be evaluating and bringing to council. So it would all come out of that same pot of money.
Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, so this proverbial pot of money, going back to the first 30, and I don't mean this, but the first 30 slides, where is it coming from and where is it going? We have dedicated money set aside for the PD staffing study results, so that's one line. You have a contingency fund that is 300,000 ongoing, 300,000 one time. That's not the pot that you're talking about
No.
either. You're talking about the 1.2 that was in ongoing that we converted to the capital improvement program contingency fund, or
I would say we're talking about the same PD staffing study dollars, because those are the other remaining dollars in the general fund get plugged into our 5-year CIP.
Yes.
okay, so that's what
It's-
so this is where I'm driving with this whole discussion then. So, and I'm not going to ask you to go back 30 slides, but if you look in your little booklet thing here, we had the one slide that was broken down like this, and on one half of it was ongoing money, 1.2, almost 1.3, is that correct?
Yes.
And then the other one was 10 point something.
Correct.
Equals 12.7 or whatever it is. No, it's 1 point something. So anyway, we're going to take that 1.2 million of ongoing money and we're going to put that into CIP.
It's in CIP reserve currently.
CIP reserve. So once that money goes into CIP reserve, there is no touching it. So all we have available to us for the second John, the second Jenna, the third court person, the receptionist, the blah, 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 comes out of Winnett's 300,000. So unless we decide that and say to the manager, don't direct 1.2 into the CIP thing, we are launching ourselves into, and this is what I'm kind of driving into, of what we're getting into for our, it's either pushed to next year or we don't have that discussion now. So I think we've got to, you know, I think we ultimately have to ask the question, if we don't push that 1.2, if we call that general fund contingency and we leave that as an, you know, as a fund, what kind of damage does that, you know, so what's the second and third order effect of that by not putting it into the CIP, et cetera? I think we need an answer to that question before we all get carried away on adding our, so I'm the guy throwing flags going, oh my God, so just.
You raise a good point, but you can always do a budget transfer of that 1.2 million out of the capital over. That can be done, okay?
Correct. Once,
But the question is, get back to you, said, if you do that transfer, what's impacted as a result? But the fact that it's there doesn't mean it can't be moved, okay?
Right,
As
but
long
we
as you know
generally
what the
don't
impact-
move
Well,
one-time money back into
Yeah, but
ongoing.
that's not one-time money. That's ongoing money that's being put in as one-time.
Right.
So there's a difference there. Go ahead.
And the ongoing, council members and mayor is 1.7. So
Okay.
it's 1.7.
Go ahead.
Can I get
Well, go ahead, go ahead.
Can I get clarification as to this last comment about the 1.7, whether we leave it as ongoing, and these gentlemen would need to answer what would happen, because it's not going into the CIP reserve, so if there's any
Yes.
repercussions?
So what the CIP reserves is used for our 5-year forecast and our CIP. So it does not change the nature of that 1.7 million. That 1.7 million is ongoing revenue, and it will be whether we use it for one-time purposes or other purposes. If anything were to come up out of today's work session or the police staffing study or any kind of strategic conversations that happen in the future that have an ongoing impact to them, we would be able to look at it at that time and come back and make recommendations for you so that council doesn't need to be looking at the 1.7 and starting to deduct from it. We're going to be able to do that and go back and find and make recommendations, whether it's from what we hear tonight or if it's from a future, when the judge comes on board, or a future discussion. We've always got the ability to make changes midstream. We've always got the ability to wait until the next fiscal year to do it as well.
And I'm not asking to do staff in this budget. I just want it on the table this year so we can have it in next year. Because everything I said to the former city manager did not get in this budget, and I wasn't able to have a conversation to find it why not. So I'm not proposing two Johns.
Hold on one
No,
second.
and I wasn't suggesting, just as the example, we start, we get carried away. So I want this.
I
and we
know
start-
that, because I said what I said, and then you jumped right on there about Gina and this, that, and the other. So, yeah, we do get carried away. But that's okay, Bill. We got our street sweeper.
The stip,
We
that's
got our
Vice,
street sweeper.
Vice Mayor, go ahead.
Well,
Laura.
it is rather interesting. We've got a brand-new budget, and all of a sudden, just a few page into the departments where we've got a lot of positions coming up that maybe could have come up, during the initial process. But this year, bringing on the ambulance and, not knowing what or unforeseen things could happen if we have to expedite it, is that also factored into a pot of money that is out there?
Well, with the recent developments, it would have to come from the pots of money that we have.
Sure.
Yeah.
So how many positions can you fund with the 1.7? I mean,
Yeah.
17, yeah.
End of the rainbow.
About 17, yeah.
Probably a little bit more than 100,000, but 17 would be a good number.
That's a good number.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
easy to do math at 100,000.
Sure.
Yeah. So, plus ambulances and things like that, so
Right.
that's, yeah.
And one of the things to factor in, one of the things Ryan talked about a lot as we went through revenues is we are conservative on our revenue projections. We make sure that we are conservative so that when things do happen during the course of the year, we're able to adapt without having to take from something else. But if revenue were not to come in as it is and a new ambulance needs to happen, we've always got the ability then to go and look within the organization, vacant positions. There's all sorts of things that we as
There's
staff
money that we-
would be able to do and be able to come back and make a recommendation to council that would be in the financial best interest of the city moving forward.
You can always freeze a position, but that you haven't hired yet and use that. There's a
Correct.
lot of options.
There's a
that you
lot of
have.
options.
Okay. Go ahead.
All right, city clerk's office. The only supplementals for the city clerk's office are our city records digitization project, commonly known as Project Tron. It's got the best nickname of any supplementals, and that's a continuation from last year. So it's just a few extra dollars to continue the part-time help to finish what we started last year. And then there's also dollars for our GO bond election coming up in November.
Okay, I've got one question, and this is gonna be for all of the departments, because on almost all of them, there's a one-time all divisions. Is that the raise we're giving them, or what is that? It says all divisions, and this is in the city clerk, so 22, they got 34,000, and in 23, it says 304,000. So the one-time monies, am I reading it wrong? Because it's in.
What page are you in the budget?
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
on page 50 of my budget book,
Third column.
third column. It says administration, elections, one-time all divisions. What does that mean? And where's that money coming from? And why are they getting it? I mean, I don't want them not to get it, but I just would like to know.
I'm sorry.
What that is that's the one-time funding for the one-time items in the city clerk's budget. It's called all divisions because rather than list out
yeah,
administration,
yeah.
city clerk, we've just lumped all the divisions into one line item for that. So that is all of the city clerk's one-time budget.
Okay, and they're saying, because it's consistent throughout this entire budget, and I couldn't figure out what it was.
Correct.
Because every department has a different amount.
Correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? My favorite department, finance. So we are recommending one additional senior accountant position, as well as dollars for a fixed asset module related to that position for our Munis financial system.
The fixed asset module, you said is that licensing for for them to get trained or to have the access level?
So Munis is our enterprise system,
Yeah.
so think of it as an add-on that specifically serves the purpose of housing our fixed assets. So
Oh, okay. It's not tied to the FTE's job. It's another component to Munis.
the FTE will actually likely utilize that module quite a bit, yes. So this FTE request is coming from a GASB pronouncement, so Government Accounting Standards Board. And they're telling us now, for example, City Hall, we just built City Hall. Whereas previously in our financials, we could put one big number and says City Hall costs this much. Now they're saying City Hall, you have to list the floors were this much, the HVAC was this much, and break it down to a much more granular detail.
Okay.
So that will allow us to see that detail in our financial system, along with the person to actually help not only do that for prospective assets, but existing assets that we have in the city.
And meet compliance as well.
Correct.
Right, thank you.
HR. So we are proposing an administrative assistant position going from part-time to full-time, adding Velocity EHS contractor module, and then additional dollars for our Gallup leadership training and Goodyear Grows programs.
Is the .53, because there's already one there part-time? Is that the only reason why you're adding
Yes.
another half? Okay.
Good. IT. So we're proposing 2 new positions, a business intelligence analyst position, a GIS analyst position, as well as contracting dollars for GIS-specific purposes. Silence is good. Digital communications, we are requesting additional photography and video equipment to ensure they can continue doing their wonderful job that they do with their social media and keeping our website updated and everything that we have at the city.
Okay. Go ahead.
And this may be a question for future, but there were several supplementals for other website activities, ballpark, ECDev, et cetera. Are we starting to splinter our website stuff as well? I mean, our website was functioning at a pretty high level. Things are much easier to find. The more we play with it, the worse it gets. I mean, I think that's common sense. What wasn't common, 10 years ago was very common today. So do we have the right people on staff to maintain the website? And because right now digital communications is focused solely on,
Digital.
Twitter and
Yeah.
Facebook and all that.
Instagram.
I'm going to call it crap because that's what I think it is. But the stuff that we really need, which is a website, where do we have does digital communications have the staff to do that, or does that live somewhere else?
So, council members, appreciate that question. Both of those requests that were in the budget, we've chosen for the next year to evaluate that and ask those exact questions in terms of the purpose behind the request, and do we have, is it a skill set, is it a functionality, capability with the existing site? So there's a small group that we've already begun meeting to ask those questions and find out what that is. And if it is something that we determine is a functionality issue and we need to look at a different solution, then what we discussed internally was potentially bringing that back next year. But this year, let's get the teams together, ask ourselves those questions and make sure that we have the right approach and right strategy.
So I'm encouraged by that, so thank you. And I think I've heard so far, and I think we will hear, that there's a number of those kinds of examinations that are going to go on this year. I think it would be great if, as a result of this budget process, we got kind of a list of, hey, these are the things we're going to work on, so that come to retreat time next year, before we get into budget time, we have some idea about what we've looked at, where we're headed, so that we're not doing that for the one budget session that we have. I think that helps us really understand the bigger picture, rather than go, well, I think, or I used the website once and I couldn't, what things do we like, what don't we like, that kind of stuff. So I just rambling.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Just a random question. I see we're using TikTok. I thought I heard in the news, is it Phoenix not using TikTok now, or somebody issued that? I'm just curious if we're still using that or not. If we're planning on still using it. It turned off?
No, it's off. Go ahead, hit it. There you go.
Hey, I was just curious about TikTok.
Yeah, hold on.
I heard in the news that City of Phoenix wasn't using it, and they were making all their employees not use it. I'm just curious, if that's still a platform that we're still using
I think the
for.
governor did too.
Probably might be a budget topic. I'm just curiosity.
Here we go. She's up. Go ahead.
Yes, Councilmember Hampton, Mayor, members of the City Council, thank you for your question. It is something that we've definitely been watching and paying attention to over the past several months, as we've seen a lot of conversations come up in the news and otherwise about it. So we do at the city have, I can only speak to us from a content creation standpoint, we do have a TikTok account that we launched late last year. So I can speak to it from a content perspective in terms of getting information out to a younger audience, which is something that we continue to try and do. I can't really speak to it from a IT perspectives, cybersecurity type thing. I'll leave that to our IT experts.
It's not a budget question, it's really just a policy. I was just curious if that was still something we were pursuing. So just curiosity, so I don't know if this to be answered today.
No, we continue to watch that very closely, and anything we do put on it is on a burner phone, so it's not a phone that we would use. Could be tracked easily, so we're protecting ourselves with that.
Did you get?
And I'll just add that before we did launch our account, we did consult with a lot of other cities who do have protocols and security in place to make sure that it is separate in terms of accessibility. And it did meet the standards of our cybersecurity expert here at the city, so we are following those rules and protocols.
Okay. Did you have something?
I did, if you don't mind, Mayor. I just wanted to thank Tammy and her staff for the wonderful job they're doing. I was at an event just today, and I was told once again how much they enjoy the In Focus magazine, and that's where they get all their information, and they appreciate that. But I really want to thank her digital folks that do our videos for us and take our pictures and make us look good and thin. I appreciate it. But
They're failing me.
But anyway, just, no, I know, but I just want them to know how much we appreciate all that they do. They do a great job.
No problem. Everybody good? Go ahead.
All right, next is our fire department. So we're requesting essentially 4.5 or 5.5 FTEs, broken out between our crisis response units, a fire plans examiner, a public information officer, converting a fire inspector to full-time, converting a part-time payroll specialist. In addition, we're proposing purchasing a decontamination vehicle, approving active shooter full-scale training and rescue kits, as well as our public safety training facility regional study.
Any questions? Go ahead, Bill.
All right, so in our small group, we had a discussion about the public information officer being sworn. PD has a non-sworn person. There's a discussion about a future look at bringing it all together, which would then eliminate the need for a sworn person. Sworn comes with significant benefits and pay, to be quite honest with you. So I know traditionally, we do a public information officer sworn because they go to the incident management teams, et cetera, but that doesn't mean that that's what we have to do. So so that's my first question, is about the sworn aspect of that. And
You got the chief right behind you. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for the question. On PIO sworn versus non-sworn, we did kick this around in the department. We just feel operationally it is a better process for us to have a sworn individual. We've piloted that over the last quarter. We've been able to bring one of our captains in and function as the PIO, and it really has gone flawlessly. We've enjoyed having that operational flexibility with having the captain in that role. He's able to quickly respond to questions from media, really with very little input from the crews in the field. He's able to get on the MCT, gain that information very quickly and turn that around for the media. So we've really enjoyed having them. And in fact, prior to having this pilot, we've always had a sworn person take call for the PIO. That puts a little more strain on them. Obviously, we do it over a 5 or 6 week call cycle, but they're taking call for 7 nights in a row. It's not a lot of fun to have to do that. So we feel like if we had a dedicated person, it would make the operation a lot more efficient for us.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Question asked and answered. The other question, and I think probably more pressing, is the decontamination vehicle. I realize just in this year's budget alone, it's almost $1 million just for the vehicle itself, and then it's 3-year lead time. Are there any other decontamination vehicles in the system?
So in the system currently, there are 9 utility vehicles. So those are system-wide. Those can respond to any working fire. They have a different job function than this decon vehicle would have. This would provide enhanced decontamination for any event, really, where a firefighter could become contaminated. So house fire, car fire, hazmat calls, even, unfortunately, a bloody EMS call. And I'm not using my British accent there. So, unfortunately, crews have to be decontaminated during some of those calls. So this is one of a kind. We would be kind of the leading edge on this. There are a few across the country that we're looking at. We do recognize the cost, but we feel like the benefit outweighs the cost in this scenario from a risk analysis. We feel like this would really further enhance the steps we've already taken to ensure the health and safety of our firefighters.
So is this vehicle intended to respond valley-wide?
Yeah, we would want this to be in the system as a resource because we've enjoyed using the utility vehicles that are in the system currently. We could, if council so desires, really limit it to the West Valley so it doesn't get pulled into Phoenix or into, God forbid, the East Valley. But we could geofence it into the West Valley and be able to provide the 9 departments that are in automatic aid in the West Valley.
So, much like we did with crisis response, we're asking the citizens of Goodyear to fund a significant investment in something for the entire system that doesn't even exist. Much different than the utilities. So I guess, just thinking about that from a cost of the vehicle perspective. And then we're talking about 3 operators for that. And I assume then you're anticipating that this become part of the minimum staffing for the day.
Correct. Yeah,
So
would be
this
a
now becomes 5 positions or 6 positions
Yeah.
based on overtime and time off, et cetera.
Yeah, we're not really seeing that number. It kind of encroaches a little bit towards 5, but I don't think it's as high as you stated. But
Maybe not
to your-
high as 6, but
Yeah,
probably
but to your
5.
point, yes, we would staff this on a daily basis.
So 500, you know, we use the five, if we're just sticking with the 100 for simple math, $500,000 a year ongoing money for a vehicle in this regard. I mean, clearly, I'm the outlier on this, but I think from public policy perspective, we need to take a look at what we're trying to do and how we're going through it. I obviously would like to see this geofenced closer than the entire West Valley, so that this vehicle is not sitting up in surprise when the Goodyear firefighters have a house fire, and it is completely unavailable to them. I cannot look my neighbors in the face and tell them I spent $1 million on a truck and $500,000 a year for that vehicle to sit in surprise, when the Goodyear firefighters who we paid and who we put this in service for are left unprotected, because there's not another one of them. So now I realize that conversation is 3 years from now, and I'll be long gone, and you won't have to listen to me, because I do not intend to come back for public comment. So, but I think we just have to, again, this is one of those programs that we're getting the tip of this spear, and we haven't had any of the conversation to go behind it and any of this going forward. This never came up as a, oh my God, we have an issue like the crisis response vehicle did. We spent a couple of years looking at that and getting information. The ambulances, same thing. But this thing pops up and go, oh, it's a budget supplemental, we'll just deal with it there. So all I have right now are just comments, but I appreciate you at least answering those questions.
And if I could just to
Oh, yeah.
clarify on the build time, right now we're hearing from the vendor on a vehicle like this, minimum 38 months, possibly, probably longer than that. So that's why we wanted to get it on the discussion point earlier, because we knew the build time was going to be pretty significant.
Vicki?
I agree with what Bill was saying, but I also agree with what Paul is saying. I agree that, I think that it should be more just Goodyear, in the Goodyear vicinity. If we're paying this money, then I think, you know how I feel about a lot of this stuff anyway, I've been talking to you about it. Goodyear needs to start taking the lead on some of this stuff, instead of being everywhere. Because when something happens in our area, we're not here to respond. It's no different than having to take, and we can get to that later, but having to take prisoners to Phoenix and Phoenix not meeting us halfway, which I experienced last week, which I think is a bunch of bunk also. So my feeling is that let's keep it in Goodyear. If we're going to pay it, let's keep it in Goodyear. Let's Goodyear take the lead. I absolutely think there needs to be this unit, absolutely think there needs to be it, because we're trying to protect our firefighters. I had to deal with some of the same type of things with 9/11, that's going back 20 years, but it basically is still today. And it's when those towers fell, the asbestos, the benzenes. Paul, you were telling me some of the different cancer-causing chemicals that are out there, and our firefighters are being exposed to that. We know that now. So for us not to do something about it with what we've had in our system with Gilbert and Austin Pack and things like this, we would be remiss not to make sure that we were following through with some of these things now. It would make us look very bad not to do what we need to do as a city. So I agree absolutely with you, and I agree with Bill too. I think it needs to stay in our area if in fact we are paying that money out for it. And I think that with a lot of things with Goodyear, I think Goodyear needs to start taking the lead. They're becoming big enough to do it.
Sherry?
I think that's a very good idea to get this vehicle started. I know, because it does take such a long time to get it through, and we spent so much time making sure our engines are more compatible, our fire stations, we have the decontamination. I think this makes the continuation of care throughout good for our firefighters. I like the geofencing idea. I don't know how that would work, and that's up for people smarter than me on this area to figure out how that would work to make sure that it is protected when our fire, since we cover Litchfield Park, or if we're on automatic aid with Avondale. I don't want to say, well, you're a Goodyear firefighter, and now you, because we do have those partners that are really close, Buckeye Valley. So I'm not sure how, whether it's an intergovernmental agreement or it's the geofencing. Those are for your questions, but I think it's a good idea. I would not want it to be off, like way off in Surprise or way off in Mesa. But in the local area where we're still probably responding, or if there was a big fire where a lot of people are called down from everywhere, then I think that would be a good reason. So I think those are issues that we've got plenty of time to work out.
Yeah.
And maybe by then, other people will get on board too. If there's one in the East Valley, one in the West Valley, that may help too. So I think that's a great idea. And for the public information officer, that person, because right now you said rotating it.
Yeah.
If I'm in the news media and we have a public information officer, they would, like, Channel 10 would know that's who to call then, right?
Yes.
It would go
yeah, so
exactly
current-
to them.
Yeah, currently it goes to a distribution list, so there's, probably more than 10 people that get that. And it's whoever's up for PIO, then would respond back. Sometimes there is a delay there, but you're correct. Yes, if they knew they had a point of contact for PIO, they would go direct to that person. So it would make it a little bit faster.
And I think that's back to we need to answer the phones. I think that helps us answer basically the phones for those issues. And usually issues dealing with the fire department are not issues you can put off. They're pretty time sensitive.
Yes.
It's like police, so I do support that. So thank you very much.
Wally?
Okay, I have no concern with fire budget, except for buying the land in Mobile, but then they know I'm the outlier for that one. Okay, oh, yeah,
It's in the CIP.
it is too.
In the CIP. we're not
It's in the
there.
CIP.
Then I don't want to say anything.
Okay.
But I'm waiting. So-
Okay, you're waiting. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
no, I agree with both Sherry, Bill, and with Vicki on the decontamination unit. And if it does take 5 years to build, we need to start it now so that we do have it in 5 years. Because in 5 years, we're going to be, I don't know that we'll be twice as big, but we're going to have so much growth, and it's important that we have this for our firemen, for their safety.
Laura?
Well, I think for the decontamination, I agree. This is, start the process, and then we'll see what the world looks like by the time it arrives. On the sworn officer, so you've been rotating it, and have you considered like assignment pay or something with the rotation? Is
Yeah.
it really a full-time job at this point?
Yeah, plus. It's
is.
a job plus, especially now where, and that's what we looked at over this, the last quarter is kind of piloting it, but seeing really what access and how we can immerse ourselves into different platforms, so Twitter and YouTube.
So that's social media, the
Yeah,
whole
we got a
thing.
really big increase in our social media use and our volume of traffic into our platform. So it really showed a big difference. The rotation does not allow for that.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Anything else? All right, go ahead.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next up is our PD budget. We're recommending 11.5 FTEs. 8 of those relate to a police squad. In addition, 1 terrorism liaison officer, a vehicular crimes investigator, traffic motorcycle officer, and a half a person for municipal security ops. In addition, the active shooter full-scale training, that is a joint thing between fire and PD, as well as police training simulator operating costs.
Questions? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Development services. So 1 FTE, a code compliance officer, as well as contract plan review and inspection services, so peak shaving dollars, and then zoning ordinance and our design standards update. That came out of our council February retreat as well for our design standards update.
I personally like the fact we're adding more code compliance officers as we're growing. We pride ourselves on a pristine city, and sometimes it gets a little away from us. Even coming in here, we need to kind of watch some of the weeds on the outer perimeter of our place here. So I appreciate the code compliance officer. Maybe we get a better handle on some of the non-compliant that's out there. Anything else? Go ahead, Bill.
The zoning ordinance and design standard update, obviously this is for the next fiscal year. We kind of should have already had this started. If I get one more phone call about where things are at with our zoning changes or our processes, I think we're going to start we're going to pull off ugly scab, but this has got to move fast. And this is not, we'll get to it by January, February. I mean, this has got to be done quickly. So let's talk to that, because we're against the wall right now.
Mayor, council, thank you on the design standards. That came up during the council retreat, and we've already have the contract and it's beginning, we've got the contractor selected for the design standards update, and that process is moving. That's a $90,000 contract that we've executed. So that is in process currently and is expected to be complete by the end of this particular calendar year, not fiscal year, calendar year.
So we won't, I mean, obviously have it completed by December, but so if we've got a scope of work already identified, I'd really like to see what does that look like, what's coming first, what are we doing last?
Sure.
So that we can start talking to the concerned parties in this and say, how do we get this moving forward?
Sure.
Because simultaneously with this, we are undergoing the impact fee study, and that is sending shockwaves through the development community. And if these two things are going on simultaneously and they are both exceptionally disruptive, we're going to be in for a very rocky ride in 23 and 24. So I want to kind of get ahead of that and or at least have an understanding for all of us, because we all get those phone calls, some to more degree than others.
And
Hold on. Did you have?
Yeah, I have a
Look at
question.
Wally.
Bill, when did we have our retreat? Was it October,
February.
February?
Beginning of February.
Just this February? Okay. I thought we had this conversation last retreat too about the design guidelines. I mean, I've been having this conversation for years. Well, yeah, I'm 12 years now, but yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay.
You okay, Wally? Go
I
ahead.
think something my friendly IG person just reminded us of, that we also have to watch what the legislature excuse me, I can't even talk tonight, preempts us on also with those design guidelines, so working to get ahead of that.
Yeah.
Good point. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Oh, this is a topic for right now, but talking about code compliance, just making sure, is there a spot in here where we're also looking at updating our code? Or just in looking at, reviewing it, or anything like that as well? Just for our code compliance. I'm just
I don't
thinking
think
about
so.
as our city, as we're building a lot of things right now, I'm thinking 10 years, just maintain, 20 years, maintaining the quality that we have, so we don't end up like maybe some of our other, like a first-tier city. So just maintain the high quality, what it is today. So I don't know how to do that, because I don't know if other cities are maintaining their high quality. And I don't know, are we different enough? Is our code compliance at a higher quality than maybe a first-tier city, for example?
Thank you, Mayor, Council, Councilmember Hampton. The code has a active list of things that are confusing to residents and things of that nature in some cases that need to be clarified for greater certainty. So that is a list that we actively are working on. That is nothing that we need to hire anybody out for. We just simply need to work with Rourke's office to get those things cleaned up. So there is an ongoing list. Code compliance also relies on the International Property Maintenance Code, which is part of the entire building code update that's going to be coming to council hopefully before break. So that will also be updated. Right now we work off of the 2018 code cycle, and this will get us up to the 2021 code cycle. So we do update those frequently, and it's the same standards that apply basically internationally. But one difference between Goodyear and other communities is our initial requirements are different. So that's why Goodyear looks and feels different than some other neighboring communities, because we have different requirements from the get-go. And then it's just and then code compliance is to maintain that, as you pointed out, over time.
Okay, yeah, we're such a fast-growing city. I'm just trying to think many years ahead of time. The things we're building today, are they going to look just as good?
Right.
and I'm comparing us to maybe our peer cities that I don't want to look like necessarily.
Understood.
So, all right, thank you.
Laura?
On these, I have another question about that. The zoning ordinance, we've been talking recently about the land in Mobile that was homesteaded perhaps through the federal government, and was wondering if that would be included in this zoning study.
He's back.
Oh, well, I'd like to go ahead and answer that. Internal discussions, I'd like to see that come before, ahead of the schedule of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that, and we had that discussion this morning dealing with that, to try to bring that up.
Yeah, I've got someone looking to try to find out where and when the federal government actually did this, and I haven't been successful yet.
Okay. All right. Next.
Economic development, proposing one new position, a marketing specialist, as well as dollars to continue marketing at Civic Square and GSQ, a targeted industry study, and to expand or enhance our, create and expand our business retention and expansion program.
Question? Question?
The targeted industry marketing, do we have a specific industry we're targeting, or is that just a general, or still, according to our plan, that we're targeting
When
the
it's coming
same 5 things?
I believe that's what the study is going to tell us.
Where we should focus?
I'll let Wendy
Here's
speak. So,
Wendy's behind you.
yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember Hampton. We just completed, or we're in the process of just wrapping up, a strategic plan that outlined industry sectors and opportunities for the city of Goodyear to pursue. Some of those, as you alluded to, are industries that we're already working in, and some of them are areas of opportunity for Goodyear.
All right, just want to clarify, thank you.
So I have a question.
Go ahead.
It seems every year or every 2 years, we're studying the land to see where economic development is. We did a retail study, we've done a restaurant study, and now we're studying the market. So are we moving forward, really? Or are we just studying to death?
That is actually a very good question. The reality is that there are changes in the market, trends in the market, and building development, they follow those trends. Changes in the economy affect how people invest their money, how companies invest their money, and where they invest. Right now, there's a lot of opportunity in Goodyear, and we want to make sure that we're focusing our energies where it's going to reap the greatest reward for our community and provide the greatest investment, which will ultimately be good for our residents.
Okay.
Are we good? Oh, go ahead.
Are we utilizing GPEC? I know they offered to help us with an economic assessment of the area. And I was just curious if we were pursuing that, or if that's if that's buried in here anywhere. If there's any money that it takes to do that.
From GPEC or?
Yeah, for GPEC to come help us with an economic assessment of our area.
So we do have a membership that we pay into GPEC. Is that what you're referring to, or a special study for GPEC?
When they came and presented, they said that, that they offer a economic assessment of cities or members. And I was just curious if that's something that we're pursuing, or is that something that is there money tied to having them help us with that? Or are they just going to do it?
Is that the annual report?
This was the first year that I was exposed to that, and we did just have a meeting with GPEC as part of that annual review with communities. And it was a working session. We didn't have an actual report from it. It was sort of a working session where we analyzed the different trends in Goodyear from what GPEC is seeing, and we looked to see what opportunities, the way that Goodyear could best position ourselves to take advantage of those opportunities that GPEC is seeing.
I think it was more than that. It was a lot more. I felt it was a lot more than what they were offering?
When they came and presented to council, I think in October, maybe,
Something like that.
I may have the date wrong, but when they came and presented to council, they did indicate that there was a community assessment report, and following that, they indicated it wasn't an actual report. It was it was really more of a conversation, a meeting that we would have with them to analyze our industry sectors and see how it's in alignment with market trends that they're seeing.
Okay. Okay. I guess we can talk about it some more later. Thanks.
Hey, go ahead, Bill.
Since I'm not going to complain all night, I just wanted to say how much I appreciated seeing the business retention and expansion program. We spend so much time on developing this economy that it's important for us not to forget to retain what we have. So seeing an emphasis in business retention is, I think, really key. So I appreciate seeing that. The Civic Square GSQ area marketing, I don't know that we have really a role in that. And I don't know that we're going to be able to do anything more than Globe and Red are going to do. But the faster we get it done, the happier people are going to be. So I'm not complaining about that. I just wanted to give a tip of the hat to business retention. So thanks.
We good? Everybody all right? Go ahead.
Engineering is next. 1 FTE for an Intelligent Transportation Systems Technician, ITS. Also contract services for project management, again, more peak shaving dollars one time. And then phase 2 of our microtransit program.
So you're saying we need some light control, is that what you're telling me? Get a little smile from Bill over there. Okay,
I know we didn't create the name Intelligent Transportation, but
yeah, I know.
maybe one day.
Yeah. Okay, I know. Go ahead.
No, what's the phase 2 of the program? Is this just a continuation of the microtransit program?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're going to move out of pilot and we're going to go into active use? What's the plan?
It's extending the hours, so we'll catch more of the early commuters and as well as more of dining entertainment in the evenings. So the next natural progression is adding hours to the existing zone. I know Christine plans on coming back to present more of that in the future, but that's what phase 2, to my understanding, represents.
I just wanted somebody to say it out loud.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I would rather expand the routes than expand the hours. But we can't do that until November, right?
Well, I think
that right?
you're stuck in the expanding the route piece, because if you look, and I'm not speaking for staff, but if you look at the cost of this program for us versus the cost for Avondale for the same square miles, ours is significantly higher. Because we don't have a lot of people using it. So if we make the area bigger and less people use it, it's going to be even more expensive. So
Yeah, but we've got people that want to use it that it didn't come to them.
yeah, I think that was the genesis of our conversation last week, which is let's find out where do they really want to go and do they really want to use it, or do they just want to have it available? You know, it's a user thing, and I think public transportation has that problem. The other thing that I would hate for us to get too far ahead of, speaking from the Valley Metro perspective, is if Valley Metro is being positioned to fund this, or maybe we let them spend the money on that aspect. So I think this one we have to be super careful that we don't get too big too fast and let this thing kind of develop naturally, and then answer those questions and then look at the expansion. But right now we're missing all weekend riders, we're missing all dinner riders, we're missing all early commuters. I mean, those are big chunks of people. Yeah, well, you can.
I can't get home.
But you can't get home. So you could take it here, but you can't get home. So I think when we talk about, you know, what we've done with our existing zones, just purely from that public transit perspective, this is the next logical step. while simultaneously, to your point, Wally, about we're always studying something, what does the next growth area look like? We have to solve the financial problem of Estrella. There's 8 miles or 7 miles of non-revenue mile. They're non-revenue miles to go from Estrella down to, yeah, I promise you it's not light rail. But, we've got to, we got to figure that part out too. So someone's got to study that, and we've got to figure that out. So, but I'm off.
We all good? All right, what you got next?
Parks and Rec. So 7.5 FTEs, 6 of those related to right-of-way maintenance. Over half of those 6 here specifically around the GSQ area. Adding adaptive recreation program FTEs, 1.5, as well as it's a 0 FTE impact, but converting some of our part-time staff at the rec center to full-time customer service reps. Other highlights include dollars for our ice rink again, traffic signal cabinet enhancements, and dollars for our Goodyear Ballpark 15th anniversary celebration.
Go ahead.
So the ice rink is the plastic ice that we had. I noticed that there is a provision in there if we're able to get sponsors to update it to ice. Baby. Sorry, I had to do it. I was just seeing if anybody caught it. But if we are able to get it to real ice, then the sponsors will do the additional piece. At what point do we, because this has been so popular, at what point do we add this into the base budget?
It's a good question. Maybe after this year? Yeah.
Okay,
Good question.
just saying.
Yep.
The only thing I would like to add on the park and right-of-way maintenance is for parks to take a look at some of the maintenance as you go through there. Are there unnecessarily high bushes and things that we really should replace with maybe low growing from a safety standpoint? And then also from a maintenance standpoint, if they're not growing nearly as fast, you're not out there cutting it as much. So just please take a look at that to see if we can save some money down there and also watering. Okay? Thanks. Next.
I just have a
go
concern
ahead.
about, and I bring this up every year, giving the Mavericks a one-time cost of $75,000 for us to provide the resources for them to have a fundraiser at our ballpark. And this is the only 501c3 we do this for. So we've set a precedent of doing it, and the rationale to me was, well, they bring 4,000 or 5,000 people for their event. Well, maybe they do, but that's still a 501c3.
They also raise a lot of money for,
Yeah, but it doesn't stay all in the West Valley, Joe. It goes all over. I thought of that, it's not just for the West Valley. That's my heartburn. It goes Phoenix Children, or not Phoenix Children, but it goes all over. But I just hate it because then nonprofits that I'm affiliated with that want to do it, we know we can't do it. So, that's all.
do you want to come on up and address that?
I know, they bring a lot of people, and they bring a lot of food trucks, and it's a lot of fun, and I buy the $175 packet every year. No, I don't think we get anything,
Yes, any food truck that comes into town would have to pay sales tax.
do we? I don't buy the food.
I haven't looked specifically,
Go ahead.
but we can definitely.
Go ahead, Nathan. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The Mavericks food truck event attracted nearly 16,000 people this past year. We charge them back operational expenses. That comes really close to equaling the sponsorship that they pay, or that we pay them. They in turn pay us for the rental of the ballpark. They're covering police, fire, cleaning, all of that sort of thing. When we looked at this, it was an established special event, and for us to duplicate that with city effort, it would take a lot more resources to provide this opportunity for the community. So that went into the reason why we supported this supplemental.
Thank you.
Don't go anywhere. Don't go.
Oh, you got a question?
Yeah, I've got a question. So there's no way around doing something, like if Wally has something that she thinks would be good, There's no way of getting another one, something like that in there that we couldn't look at? Or would it cost too much money to do it?
I'm going to jump in here.
Okay.
It depends on what it is, and it may
Okay.
not be out of Parks and Recreation. This particular one is through Parks and Recreation.
Parks and Recreation, okay.
So I would have to explore, and we do have the community funding
Okay.
process where nonprofits, apply for money
Yeah.
every year. So it really would depend.
So we just have to kind of check. I mean, because I think it's a really good deal. I think what you're doing and what they're doing is a good thing. But I also think that how do you do for one and not do for others? I agree with you on that. And is there some way we can think outside the box a little bit, like the fine print? Is there something that maybe we could do, or some way we could do something for some of these other affiliations that makes it look like we're being fair to everyone? That's not going to cost us an arm and a leg. You know what I mean? Something to look at.
Go ahead.
I do appreciate that. I think they bring a lot of people in, but of course, if there's more and there's a process to go through, I'm sure Nathan would love to have more people at the ballpark for different events and other parks. I know we used to do Goodyear in Action, used to do stuff, so a lot of places have used it for other events and stuff. So I think they just need to contact the cities to go through the process, and we can see what we can do. I do want to give kudos for the adaptive recreation program, so thank you very much. I think that's a great one. I know our parks, our new parks, we set up for that as well, so I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
With us potentially having all our city staff be at the rec center, is there an adequate budget for the potentially higher users, higher maintenance to cover, I don't know if every staff, almost 1,000 city employees are going to be there or not, and their kids and their families, but I'm just curious if that increase is factored into just the maintenance and the upkeep of the facility.
That's a great point. We're going to add them to the 400,000 that are coming already.
Yeah.
We're going to evaluate it over the next year, but we think we'll be okay this year. Not sure what to expect and how many will actually take advantage of that tremendous opportunity, but we'll have enough to cover it this year and then reevaluate for next year.
Okay, thank you.
That's a great point. Thank you.
Everybody okay? Well, we got a request for about a 10-minute break. How's that? So that would put us at 7:06? All right, 10-minute break.
All right. Just a couple more departments to go through, and then our CIP to wrap up the night. So Public Works, we have 5 FTEs. 3 of those are street maintenance workers. There's a project manager and a facilities technician position.
What's the deal on the ice rink thing?
On Parks and Rec,
On the Parks and Rec, yeah.
uh,
The ice rink?
we have it in there that where we're going to use the fake ice, but if we can get a sponsor to make up the difference, we'll do the real ice.
And they have a sponsor in mind?
We are pursuing that, a couple different
Okay.
agencies.
But we're not paying for that unless we get a sponsor?
Not for the increase, no, it has to have a sponsor with it.
Perfect, okay, thanks.
Take the 225, we're gonna have it one way or the other.
Yes, yes.
Any questions on Public Works? Solid Waste, these are our enterprise funds broken out, nothing from our solid waste fund being requested or recommended this year. In our water fund, there's 2 positions, a utility locator and a utility technician position. So when new development comes in, you know those stakes that go into the ground that are different colors, they represent different electricity, sewer, that they help go out and place those. Blue stakes, yep.
Blue stakes? Any questions? Water fund? All right, next.
And then nothing in wastewater, and that is it for supplementals. So our 5-year capital improvement program. So yeah, the CIP is a large section in the book because there's a couple different summaries and then it breaks it down by project. So you're talking probably close to 100 pages total for all the CIP in there, which always makes it fun to talk through. So just a little bit of background on what our CIP here at Goodyear is. So we have a fully funded 5-year and deliverable CIP. Any project that is $100,000 or more goes into our CIP program. It includes all funding sources, so all of our funds at the city. Projects are entered using today's cost. That means if a project isn't budgeted until fiscal year 27, we're putting it in there in the budget as to what it would cost today, and then each year we reevaluate and update those costs accordingly. And then we talked about our CIP reserve, so that's our unallocated fund balance that's programmed, that $12 million going way back to the presentation earlier on. That goes in to help fund the future years of the 5-year CIP. And it allows us to move projects forward if we want to that are budgeted for future years into the current budget year if it makes sense to do so. So in order to present a fully funded 5-year CIP, we have to do every single year, put in place some mechanisms to ensure that we can support it and that we can fund everything that we say we're going to spend. So some of those assumptions that go into this year's CIP specifically are around our construction sales tax, purchasing long-term storage credits for the water fund, impact fee rate increases, which we talked about, will be presented to you here by Jared in about a month or so. Our interfund development impact fee loans from construction sales tax, so that allows us to build ahead of growth. And then we also have debt being issued that is factored into the 5-year forecast, specifically for streets related to our Australia Bridge project, as well as for our wastewater development impact fee, so our Goodyear Water Reclamation Facility. And then last but not least, our Rainbow Valley Water Reclamation Facility. There is developer funding for about 32 of the $37 million of that project.
A random water question. I'll probably ask Barbara later, but so the one-time construction sales tax to purchase long-term storage credits. So if I use, it's probably way more than $1. Use $1 of one-time construction sales tax. How long can I use that water for? How long does that last? Is there a certain duration? And then we got to always keep You'll get the next year and the next year, or I'm just curious how much growth can we predict going forward with
I think
that?
Doug
kind
has
of
some good
credit?
information on that as far as storage credits and the timing of renewals and everything, discussions he's been having.
It's probably maybe more complex. I'm just curious if there's a way to simplify it.
Yeah, we foresee using the construction sales tax to purchase the long-term storage credits over the next 5 years, but not having to purchase any more after that because the fund will be back being able to cover its own costs at that point. When it has enough financial availability, they would be able to buy those long-term storage credits back from the construction sales tax fund. The credits themselves are actually stored in the ground, and we do not foresee that they're going to be used in the next 5 years. If growth or the need came on faster than that, we would be able to accelerate that.
Okay, I just want to put ourselves in a place where we can't grow because we don't have the water to do so because of we didn't buy enough or they didn't last as long as we
No,
anticipated or.
Yeah, these are long-term storage credits. They're already owned by the city's water system. It's just that they will be purchased from the city's construction sales tax fund.
Okay, just want to clarify, so, thank you.
Okay?
So what does that mean? So we've got all this that goes in, so we've got a 5-year CIP program of $486.5 million. Compare that to last year during our city manager's recommended budget, we had about a $500 million 5-year CIP. And this graph in front of you shows where the majority of the dollars are being spent. It's always fun trying to talk through $500 million and where the money's going, right, in a short period of time. So kind of like what we did last year, we're going to focus on where the dollars are actually at. So if you look at the graph here, the most of our spend is coming out of fiscal year 23, which has already been funded, and fiscal year 24. So if you look at the future years, 25 and 27, in 25 there in that gray area, that big chunk is our Estrella Bridge project. So you take that out, and that shrinks what's actually in 25 quite a bit, by half almost. And if you look at fiscal year 27, that big chunk of blue in there, that is our Goodyear Water Reclamation Facility project. You take that out, that also shrinks. So the majority of our spend in our 5-year project is going to be in fiscal year 24 coming up. With fiscal year 23, all the carryovers that we have going into. So a good way to explain what are you going to see, if somebody asks what are you going to see in Goodyear in 24, it's going to be a lot of continuations of projects that we have in 23, finishing up in fiscal year 2024. So out of that $486 million, there was $125 million of new projects. So new projects that hadn't existed in last year's 5-year CIP. Out of those, though, we can whittle that down pretty easily. There's the $40 million of GO bond budget authority, which we talked about, that's sitting in there. Back that out of it. There's $35 million in development agreements related to our parking garage and the extension of Goodyear Way in Monte Vista. Back that out of it. And then there's another $25 million of asset management and reimbursements, so that's replacing existing capital that we already have. So out of the $125 million new dollars that did not exist last year, there's really only $25 million of new projects that we've never talked about or never seen. So that's a great way to kind of put it in perspective. It's a big dollar, but very little of what we're going to talk about tonight is something that you haven't discussed either in previous years or seen before. And this slide is just a different way to look at the same numbers. You see a lot of our spend again in 24. Again, 25, half of that Estrella Bridge. 27, half of that Goodyear Water Reclamation Facility. But if you look at it left to right, which departments or which functional areas are actually spending money, engineering and streets, right? Last year, transportation was a big focus. So we'll dive into some of our transportation and streets projects and give an update on some of those. So again, Estrella Bridge, currently scheduled for construction in fiscal year 2025. That is unchanged from last year. We're currently spending dollars in design now. There will be a small land acquisition piece, but the majority of that spend will be in fiscal year 2025. Traffic signals. There's about $28 million of traffic signals over the whole 5 years in there. And I actually have a slide I'm going to skip ahead here at the very end of the presentation that shows where the traffic signals, where are you going to actually see construction happening over the next year or so. So at the top in red, That's fiscal year '23, that's this current year. We're gonna have a traffic signal that'll be going up at McDowell and Clubhouse Drive.
They're doing it now.
So that one's in, so that's where you're seeing construction, so that's exactly, so in '24, there'll be a couple other locations where you will see construction, you'll see those traffic signals going up. Those locations are at 152nd Avenue and Van Buren, so kind of between Estrella Parkway and Bullard. You'll also see one at Estrella Parkway and Centera Drive, so that's just south of Salad and Go on Estrella. And you'll also see one go up at Camelback and Perryville, over near Sedaya. I've also got listed on there the 25 projects. As we get up into future years, there is some flexibility on, based on where we grow, to move those around. Starting into next year, we've already kind of started some of that design, so those are kind of locked in. But as you get out to 25 in future years, there is a bit more ability to mix and match those and move those where growth is occurring, if it makes sense to do so.
So tell me where the two black ones are.
So there are two that are not,
They're in design.
yes.
And
So-
I get the Camelback one, that's 303 and Camelback. What's
Yep.
the one down there?
So there are two that are not currently listed on here that I have the asterisks for. Those are in Estrella Mountain Ranch, because my map wasn't big enough for it, basically. So, and because it was only design, you're not going to see construction until outside of 25 into 26 as they're scheduled today. I didn't specifically put them on the map, but those are located at Estrella Parkway and Calistoga Drive. So that is just past Estrella Foothills High School. And then there's another one going up at San Gabriel and Elliott, and that's near the Estrella Mountain
Oh, they
Elementary.
need that.
So by both schools are where the traffic signals are
Great.
scheduled to go up.
Great.
Sherry, you had something?
No, oh, she's turning. I'm just seeing how great that they are.
Go ahead, you're on. You're on.
I have no clue. Okay. So the schools, thank you. So what year were those going to go in?
Those are, you will see construction past 2025, so likely 2026, 2027 timeframe.
Okay, so it'll still be a couple,
Still a couple years for those as of right now.
okay.
That is definitely a discussion we can have, yes.
Okay, because I know the one by the grade school has been a big issue up there to try to get something up there when those kids cross, because people run that like crazy, even with all the flashy lights and everything. That's not really helping. So I know the community really would like to see that one elevated if possible. My other question was, I have two more questions on just this, on the Estrella issue. When we do the bridge, which I think is definitely needed, is that going to design it around Vineyard and fix the Vineyard? Because I know there was just an accident, it was closed coming down today, Estrella, because there was a bad accident off of Vineyard. Is that going to fix that whole road all the way to MC 85 when we do that bridge?
I might need some help on that one, so.
Well, because I don't think that there's a light
There,
for there.
there's not a light, but that road is just horrid going up there because it like juts over, and I appreciate Streets just restriped it because it was so bad to see at nighttime that people were not jutting over. So it's, I know we've got it in the CAP, I just want to make sure that that's actually going to fix. We're not creating more scallops and more back and forth on that road.
Mayor and Council will be widening Estrella from Vineyard to MC 85 in addition to adding a whole bridge for two-way movement of traffic on Estrella Bridge itself.
And when we do that, are we going to fix the issue so people can turn right on Vineyard or turn out of Vineyard? Is there going to be some sort of turning lane or there or something? I know it's a really odd place.
That'll be the end of the project, and we'll be evaluating that.
Okay, yeah, because that needs to be fixed, because like I said, there's people, that's dangerous, they're getting out of there.
It is, yeah.
So thank you for restriping that, I do appreciate all that. And then on Bullard, there's the light on Bullard and Yuma, is that one on here? I can't quite see, my eyes may not be.
The one on
It's just
span
hanging,
wire.
it's just hanging right now, is that going to be a real light?
It is on our plan, but I'll have to see where exactly in the CIP it is, because we had been just waiting for one of the developers on one of the corners before just going ahead and finishing that signal to be the complete
Is it in the SHRP?
signal.
Why can't we get the light on there and then get it from the developer when he develops? Haven't we done that before? Why are we waiting?
Yeah, the roadway's that.
Hold on, I think somebody wants to, come on up. Did you want to add?
Yeah, Mayor, members of council. Question on Bullard and Yuma. That is scheduled for design in fiscal '24, construction in fiscal '25 is how it's
Okay.
scheduled in the CIP.
Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't see for the colors which one, and my eyes aren't that good, so I appreciate it. So thank you.
We'll take a look at that and make sure that it does match the CIP, but we'll take it offline and get back to you a good copy if that's not accurate. So, thank you for calling that out.
Check to see with the warrants for the one up in Estrella by the grade school.
Good questions. Anything else?
So, getting back to additional streets, engineering, transportation projects that are in there. Bigger dollar projects, so kind of starting big, Estrella Bridge, traffic signals, working our way down. We have Saraville Avenue, the west half, between Yuma Road and Elwood. We have Cotton, that should be Lane instead of Cotton Land, although it's got a nice ring to it. And Estrella Parkway intersection, and then Citrus Road, I-10 to Thomas, that's $8.8 million. And I do want to point out that because of our GO bond election that we have, none of these projects that would utilize GO funding are currently in the 5-year CIP. It's sitting outside of the 5 years. We get the funding, we would move those projects up accordingly. Any questions?
Go ahead, Bill.
So the improvements on Cotton Lane at Yuma that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, that is in this fiscal year?
Traffic guru.
Yes, sir, that will be, it's planned to be completed by December of this calendar year.
Right,
So
but
we
we're
got the
funding
money
it with
from
this
this fiscal year, correct.
So we'll have a
Correct.
carryover to
Correct.
finish that out, okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So then turning to existing projects again, because a lot of what we have in this year will carry over into fiscal year '24. We mentioned Estrella Bridge, the design, that's the $8.9 million that's going on currently. Total project of around $67 million. Camelback Corridor, that's cost sharing with Glendale, and that project will most likely be downsized to only the Goodyear portion of that. From a facility standpoint, we've got our police building phase 2. That project is pretty much wrapping up right now. We've got Fire Station 188, Fire Station 182 and 183. With those renovations, we're making sure that we bring all of our fire stations up to the same protocol for cancer prevention standpoints. And then we have tenant improvements over at GMC. On the wastewater and water side, we've got a brine disposal project. All these were in here, again, all these are fiscal year '23 projects. You've seen all these, so if they sound familiar. Brine disposal will likely have a big carryover as well. That has to do with APS and Palo Verde, doing a partnership with them. Rainbow Valley Water Reclamation Facility, $39 million project. That's an expansion of 1.5 MGDs. We talked about how that one is reimbursable for about $32 million up to $39 million. And then we have some water line replacements in historic Goodyear. And then the first piece of our Goodyear Water Reclamation Facility expansion. So I know that's a lot, but all these projects were in here this year. They're already funded. Dollars will be carried over into fiscal year '24 to continue them and complete them. But I don't know if anybody has any questions on anything specifically there.
I have a question, please, on Fire Station 188. When we began to build new fire stations, we were told that there would be a template, and we would be using that template for all the additional fire stations. And it appears that we're not doing that. And that's what we were told.
I believe Chief's here to
Chief's
speak.
behind you.
Help
Go
us.
ahead, Chief.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Councilmember Campbell, so when 186 and 181 were designed, we used a specific architect and construction company. 188 went back out for a design build bid, so a different architect, same construction company bid on this 188 project, and they won the bid. So the difference with the two architects, one will not take the other's plans. The footprint The functionality of the station is identical to 186 and 181, so we are using the template design. It's just being designed by a different architect.
Is there any way that we can use the same firm and the same architect for all of our fire stations? So that we can keep the costs down?
The cost would be very similar. It's about 10% of the project costs when you have to go to design. Because if you can think about it, standards always change, sites change. There's a lot of components that change. But the finance director and I talked about that last week, and we think there might be some future ideas that we could have to try to help that process.
It would be nice if we could somehow, I don't want to skimp on the building, and I don't want to not make it have exactly what 181 has. And I'm using 181 as our example because that was our really first of that type of a fire station, and it is wonderful. But I'd like them all built, but I just hate that it keeps escalating more and more and more. And I know cost is up, and
Yeah.
I was hoping that by using the same plans, the same architecture, and architect, and possibly the same even construction company, we would save some money, but apparently not. So that's it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Laura.
I have a question about the Rainbow Valley Water Reclamation Facility. I'm curious what the scope is of that. I know that we're expanding it, but I don't believe it's to capacity. And is this intended just to serve Estrella, or what is the plan?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council, Councilmember Cano. The project scope is currently running forward with a 500,000 gallon per day expansion. So the facility is 0.75. This would take it to 1.25. It is funded by the owner of Estrella, which is Harvard now, and they are reconsidering the size of the expansion. We're doing a master plan right now to see what their build-out capacity needs would be, and that's potentially what size this will get expanded to. So we're moving forward right now with the cost as it was scoped. There are some additional operational improvements. That's that extra piece that's not funded by them, that's funded by the wastewater fund.
Because it's only going to get more expensive anyway, but, okay.
Yeah, we feel there'll be a savings in the unit cost if they went with a larger expansion, so we're exploring that.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Bill.
So on that, Barb, on that note, we have had discussions over the last 3 or 4 years, maybe it's longer, with properties outside of Estrella that could potentially benefit from that wastewater treatment plant. That I would think that perhaps inviting them into this conversation might be beneficial to both Harvard and to the city. Are we having that discussion? I mean, these things are not cheap.
Right. So there are some areas outside of the Estrella community that we're assigning, so we assign sewer sheds, much like you see a watershed. And so there are some areas north that we think can flow there by gravity. So we're making sure that there's land available nearby. But there are proposed additional plants south of the community currently under construction. So for Terrasanti and Rainbow Valley, there's a facility that I believe we call it Pecos Road facility, and there's a Waterman Wash. So we are working with those developers on what their facility will look like and how we can incrementally expand it in a better way with a different technology than what we're currently using.
Because I'm not an engineer or construction guy, but I know that pipe is a lot cheaper than wastewater treatment plant. So, and so are lift stations, I mean, to be quite honest. So if, I think we may be missing an opportunity, it sounds like, and I know that the way Estrella has been in the past is not the way that Estrella is necessarily going to be going forward. So I'm hoping and encouraging the staff to perhaps look at that really as an opportunity to grab some of those potential new partners and encourage some real energy among them, instead of saying, well, this is Estrella's and everybody else has to do their own thing, that perhaps we can maybe even lighten our own burden, I guess, so it's kind of rhetorical.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, and we did even have a discussion earlier today with King Ranch and the possibility of corrugate, so we are certainly open to that. I do feel like it's a lot more financially feasible to operate fewer larger plants than these small plants as well. So even the ongoing operational costs are also a consideration.
Thank you.
Questions? Go ahead.
I'm sorry, this is something else about the Estrella section there. In passing, I talked to Christopher about this. At Estrella, since the bridge is going to be so far out, the traffic backs up on Estrella going on to MC 85 in the morning. Like the right turn lane, and it's only got like 3 or 4 ways for cars to wait to turn right onto MC 85 because people don't want to get on I-10, so everyone's taking MC 85 into downtown. And he was saying there's some way that we could put some, like we did Estrella under the bridge, put some extra pavement there to increase that line so people aren't going to get rear-ended. So I don't know if that's something we can look at. I don't know how much that costs. I don't think it's a CIP project necessarily, but I just wanted to bring that up now since everyone's here.
Is this where I'm bringing up about the Mobile
Well,
land?
let's get Chris.
Oh, Chris, you want to say something, dear? Sorry.
I was just going to try to answer your question on Estrella. So we did take a look at that. There's an RID channel there, which does get in the way. Otherwise, we would probably go with the approach of adding some pavement there for a temporary solution, but we're not sure that it'll actually fit on that the full construction of the project will address it. Unfortunately, yes, you're right, that is a couple of years out, but we don't think there's a way that we can get something in there today to extend that turn lane.
Is there any way we can look at the lighting, sorry, with this, the lighting with the county, since I think that's their light, not our light?
For the traffic signal?
Yeah.
Yeah, you and I can talk and we can see what
Okay.
we can do, but
Any safety things to make that a safer intersection? Because that's another one where you see lots of accidents.
yeah,
So,
we will look
thank
into it.
you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just something in line with that, and this is maybe just a pet peeve. I know that we went from lagging left to leading left now, and I feel like when I'm in Avondale, or at least when I am over there, when it was that, I felt my frustration was that their left lanes weren't long enough to fill up.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we're designed that way to optimize the leading left format. So I don't know if for design, what that looks like. I don't know, maybe it's just me and there's just a lot of traffic, but I felt like I was able to get through the light, especially in the lagging left versus the leading left, because you can't get into the leading left lane when it's all backed up. So I feel like we need to have a longer turning lane if we're gonna keep doing the leading left. So, but that's just me, but maybe because we were designed the way for lagging left that we didn't consider that, or maybe I'm way off, but that's what the frustration that I've felt with the change of how we do our lights. But, so I don't know if that's a valid or.
No, and I hear what you're saying, and some of it has to do with more capacity of what's happening next to that turn lane.
Yeah.
Like, southbound on Bullard approaching Van Buren, like, people want to get into the left turn lane, but the through lane backs up so much
It
that you
does
can't
back
get to
up.
the left. So it's not necessarily storage capacity in the turn lane, it's a storage capacity on the through lane, which we are working on as well.
Okay.
So there's a variety of different factors, but yeah, we would really like to have people to be able to clear that as best as possible, and that was the intent on the leading, is to try to get people through quicker.
Yeah.
So we can obviously still look at, future design and things like that, and I feel like I have an army of people behind me ready to
noticed
answer all those
particularly-
questions.
Which is really an Avondale thing, but I noticed particularly when I'm heading north on Dysart to get to McDowell, and I feel like you can't get into Goodyear.
You can't.
You gotta wait
Right.
for a cycle to get it over there, so, but maybe that's just one of my pet peeves. I really liked, maybe I just enjoyed the lagging left, but, sorry, just side note around traffic and overall design
Yes.
of how we're gonna do it, so thank you.
I don't know if
Does
there's
somebody
more.
want to add something back there?
Yeah, Mayor, members of council. On the turn lane issue, when you brought up Avondale, specifically Dysart and McDowell, that is an Avondale signal, as you mentioned.
Yeah, we know.
Now, keep in mind, that signal was built, or that intersection was built quite some time ago, different standards. We have some in Goodyear that are substandard as well. Our current standard is considerably longer. Some of the older ones we've seen, like, and some were just built short. Example, Litchfield and McDowell westbound, that one's pretty short, as in, I think it's barely over like 120, 125 feet. We're lengthening that one as part of a project here very soon. The current standard is 250 feet, so we're almost, not quite, but almost doubling what we used to have that would have been built 20 years ago. So our standards have evolved by our current engineering design standards, considerably longer. Also wanted to chime in, we have 4 turn lane projects that are currently happening right now in the city. One was the lengthening of the, on Estrella Parkway at Estrella and Elwood, both begin with E. Northbound, we're lengthening that right turn lane, so it'll have 1 left turn lane, 3 throughs, and 1 right headed northbound. Second project, and that one is also ongoing right now. Public Creek Parkway at Virginia, the southbound left turn modification, that I believe is almost complete as of today. There's 2 more. The westbound left turn, Litchfield and McDowell, we're lengthening that as far as we can without getting into some very expensive landscaping work. That'll add a few feet to the westbound left turn that is frequently backed up, as you have referenced earlier. And the other location is the northbound left turn, Estrella at Roosevelt. And I think that's the last project that'll be done. That's going to add some capacity at northbound left. In combination with that, it's not a CIP project, but as part of the development on that northeast corner, they will be doing some median modification work, making that southbound left on Roosevelt to head east, making that a dual left turn lane, and that will in turn also change that northbound left to a dual left turn as well, just for signal purposes. So those are a very brief summary of some left turn lane modifications that are going on. Nope. Well,
Wally, did you have something?
Is this where I just mentioned that I'm not in favor of the $135,000 to buy land in Mobile? What I am interested in, if we really want the $135,000, we take that money and we buy them a new trailer or a new house or something down there, rather than buy land and then build something. Because we don't have water there, we don't have sewer there, and we really don't need a permanent anything down there until that Mobile is developed by somebody else. Because once we do it, we're committed. So I just think that's the wrong thing to do. I'd rather get them a new house. Well, a new trailer or something.
Chief, so, see what he has to
Yeah,
say.
we own we don't own the land, we own the trailer.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. That is correct. We do not own the land. We lease that currently. In FY18, we put about $30,000 into what is now a 15-year-old double-wide trailer down there. And then in fiscal year 20, we put in money for a shade awning to provide a little bit more of sun protection. But it is showing its age. It needs additional upkeep.
Vicki, do you have something?
Yeah, I've got a couple things on this. I just visited there on Friday, and I actually went around the area, and I may be new, but I'm starting to learn the process. And I was kind of embarrassed at how we're treating the people down there. Whoever annexed this, I have no idea when it was done or why it was done. It shouldn't have been done. And apparently, the people down there were treated much better, is how they look at it, since Goodyear's taken over. And that's embarrassing to me, because you don't treat anybody that way.
Who, the residents of Mobile or
Yes.
firefighters?
No, residents of Mobile. That's one area. The firefighters are next. It was really sad to me to see what's going on down there, because it is part of our city. It's part of our city, whether we like it or not. So we have to take some responsibility, because I'm a PR person. That could give us very bad PR in this city. We can't just let them go and just ignore them. we don't want to put bad money over worse money over bad, or however, bad money over worse, however you want to say it, but we do have to take responsibility for that city because it's ours, whether we like it or not. It's ours. It's annexed. It's done. We can't take it back. Andy and I both went down there. And so I think we have to show just a little bit more compassion down there. As far as the firefighters, that trailer is unbelievable, how the position it's in and what we've allowed to happen down there to those guys and haven't gotten on it before now. I think it is shameful, despicable. I couldn't believe what I saw. There is rot all over this place. I don't know how much mold is probably beneath this fire station between these, what do you call them, Paul? The wood panels, or is it vinyl or whatever it is that we pressed on? It was awful. And the roof is the water, we don't have gutters, so the roof, the water is leaking off and it's leaking down the sides, which is causing all this dry rot all over. There's gullies around the whole bottom of the trailer that are like this deep, that I'm sure there's snakes. They were saying, Vicki, wait, I got to go out and make sure there's no snakes there, because the snakes are all over down there. I'm sure they're all in these gullies, okay? And this is like the base of this trailer has these big, huge, deep, I mean, I'm surprised somebody hasn't fallen in it. The fact that we're allowing this down there as a city, our guys that work hard for us, that they're going down there, these 3 different shifts, and they're having to deal with this is unbelievable to me. Literally, we pushed on the boards on the side of the house, and your fist almost went through it. So I was appalled, because to me, that is what we are here to do. Maybe I've got rose-colored glasses on, but I just don't think we leave people that take care of us in that type of condition. It's 15 years old, right, Paul?
Yes.
15 years old. So I don't know what the answer is. I mean, to me, if we buy the land, then we're going to have to be down there, right, Joe? It's our city.
It is our city.
We're going to have to be down there. So we don't have the option. So even to build another fire station, buy that land and build a fire station so our guys are in a decent surroundings and don't have to be treated like the redheaded stepchild, they're going to need a place to live. We got to fix this in the meantime while we're getting ready to build something, because they can't keep living like this. It's ridiculous. And we have 2 more people going down there, correct? Soon. So there's going to be 4 in that station, I think, isn't there? Yeah. Yes.
Yes, there'll be 4 in that
yeah.
station in June, yes.
To me, we got to do something. I was totally, completely appalled when I saw this. I think it's ridiculous. I think we have to fix this, and we have to decide seriously what we're going to do about it. It's our city, part of our city.
Go ahead, Sherry.
I think we've always said we bought it, we own it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of what we have, whether you like it or not. So I just want to make sure I got the finances straight. It's $135,000 for the land? That's it?
Well, yeah,
That's to buy the land?
We don't know.
that's what we've set aside to
They gotta
purchase
find
the
it.
land.
By 2027.
I know, I'm just asking the numbers. I'm trying to figure the
Yes.
numbers out. Okay.
Yep.
So it's 100, what's our current lease on that? What do we pay for leasing it?
I'll have to look at it. I haven't looked at it in a little bit.
Just
so.
curious, because I mean, at some point.
It's pretty nominal.
Like
The-
$1 a month or something. It's really cheap.
Yeah, it's very cheap.
Okay,
It's
but
really
as
cheap.
this area grows of the 303, that land's going to get more expensive. So I think it's probably good to
Yeah.
purchase it now and come up with a plan if we've got 4 people going down there in a truck. I guess one of my concerns is, even if it's a new temporary facility, maybe not the same exact station that we're going to build here, because we won't,
No.
you're going to have to
Can't.
do modifications, because it's going to have to be sewer and some other, I mean, they're going to have to do other modifications, I get that. But we need to make sure that whatever we put down there, or however we're going to fix that we have the same health and safety protocols that we do, and I don't think we can do
course.
that in our current trailer. So I guess
Oh, no.
that's, we really can't do that where we're at. So I think it's a good step, it's not a ton of money to take those steps forward. I'm not saying it's going to be the exact same station that we're going to build at 181, the same prototype right now until we get more people down there. But I think we need to have those health and safety for the people going down there and make sure that they have decent facilities down there, because we're going to have 4 people there. And I don't think cancer cares whether you get cancer at a fire in Mobile or if you get cancer in a fire here. That decontamination truck is going to have it's a long ride to get down there. So we do need to make sure that we build something and model something that has the safety for our people down there. So I support it. We have Mobile, you know, it might be a phased in, we put something there now that meets the same requirements as what we have here for health and safety. And then as it grows, we can add or change, we'll work with the developer and get bigger stations. But I think we need something down there now better than what it is. I wouldn't want to go down there, what I've heard.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree that we should look to purchase the land for the future down there. How much land is it? Is it an acre or how?
Typically, our stations are anywhere between 2.5 and 3 acres that we purchase for
Okay.
stations.
Yeah, no, I think it's fine to land bank that and then also use it for like a temporary facility, especially if it's as dire and falling apart. We need to replace that probably sooner than, or immediately. And I don't know if it needs to be like a Kelly building or something, temporary structure, or even like, you know, over Rainbow Valley, they had a temporary structure out there for a while till they built the nicer building, or even, was that off of Peoria where they had that temporary building, then they eventually made it a full building. So, so I think we need to, I think land banking and buying it for the future is a good idea. And I think, at least probably to get rid of that double wide and maybe bring a new one in and make it,
Get a better
livable.
double wide.
So, thank you.
Go ahead, Laura.
I feel like we're trying to solve your problem, but we haven't heard from you what you propose. What is your vision for that station?
Well, you know, we've been in a temporary station now on leased land for 15 years. So, you know, our vision for that area, the department's vision for that area is to get them into a permanent station, to purchase land so they can eventually have a permanent station down there. We know the infrastructure challenges, that certainly plays into it quite a bit. So we'll have to, you know, take some time and really think about how we overcome those challenges. But I think they certainly deserve to have a permanent station in that area.
So would you envision that would be done incrementally, or?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right, thank you.
That's what I'm saying, use the 135.
Paul, I want to thank you again for taking Andy and I down there, because it really was an eye-opener. And I know that you did explain your vision to us when we were down there, telling us what was going on. And also, I want to know about the health of those firefighters. Are those firefighters in that structure down there going and being checked for possible?
sure.
I mean, I'm concerned about mold and stuff that I
Yeah,
saw down
every
there.
firefighter in the department has an annual physical that
They do,
city
okay,
pays
because you have
for.
3 different shifts down there, right?
Everybody gets one.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's my concern.
The only question I have, it wouldn't be a mobile home, right? Because we don't allow them down there. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
That's the problem. That's the problem.
Yes.
That's where we have, well, I guess the only reason I mention that is at some point, we got to address that issue.
Yeah.
The people down there, when they bought down there, expected a certain style. And I know we're working on it, but I don't think we should be changing their lifestyle just because we annexed it, the residents down there. So, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So if we can't allow one, we got to be careful on there, or we allow that. So just kind of keep that in mind, Christopher, as you're working on this stuff, okay?
Yeah. And Vicki, I know they shared the whole story with you, that when they first went down there, we didn't have to do that. We had Maricopa, the city of Maricopa provided fire for us. We had no intention of ever putting a fire station down there. Well, I'm just telling you the story.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah, I do know the story. And why they aren't still doing it, I don't know.
Well, we know, but
But
that's
the
there's
bottom
neither
line
here nor
is
there.
we're there, that's all I care.
Yeah. Well,
That's all I care about
hopefully-
is that we're there.
Well, that's why I said I don't want to spend $135 on land. I'd rather get them a new place to live. But since we can't have a double wide down there,
That's what they tell us.
That's what they
I mean,
tell
if we
us.
buy them land, we're not gonna make their
Yeah, that's what I
house
said.
any better. We can't do any more construction on it.
I'm kind of just
You know?
going on what Paul is saying and what the guys down there are talking about, because they're the ones doing it. They're the ones that know what they're doing. And after seeing what I saw on Friday, I was in shock. That kind of stuff just does me in, for lack of a better saying. I mean, it's embarrassing, it's despicable on the city's part that we've allowed this. Our guys to have to deal with that. End of story, as far as I'm concerned.
All right, we got anything else on this?
We have one
more
last
slide?
slide, and so 2024, exactly what I've been saying. The highlights of 2024 are a lot of what just carryover stuff. So we talked about the development agreements, which we've got in place, traffic signals we talked through, some will be in design, some will be in construction. Our MOC, the actual dollars that would be GO eligible or not in the 5-year, this is a preliminary design number that we have in there. And then we have dollars in historic Goodyear for pavement reconstruction. There's, again, not a lot of wrap your heads around and have a newspaper story type projects that we'll have in 2024. Any questions?
No.
Do you have a question? Go ahead. Go ahead.
What's the vision or the planning or the timeline of anything for the expansion of the Goodyear Recreation Campus?
We will let Nathan come up and answer that.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We currently have dollars within the CIP plan for completion. It started this fiscal year, will be complete next fiscal year, to pull that plan together to get an idea of what Phase 2 will look like. And then from there, we'll get an idea of actual costs and look for considerations at that point going forward. But right now, that project isn't funded, so we'll have to get creative with when it comes to construction of how that happens via bond funding or other sources.
Thank you.
But we're scheduled to plan Phase 2 over the next year.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, go ahead, Bill.
So, I complained about the way that we did the land that we own around the ballpark, that we went out and asked the public first, and then we brought that to the council. I think we need to, on this rec campus, I think we need to set the parameters before we go out to the public. We have talked a couple of different times about a 40-acre lake, and we're in the middle of having no water, and we're going to fill one with, we're going to fill a recreational lake. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think we need to, I think as we get ready to plan this, there really needs to be some council direction on what the bumpers are, and then go out and ask the community. Let's not get the community all fired up about a 40-acre lake when we all know darn well that we just don't have the capacity to do it.
So our thought was, you're spot on, our thought in this process would council would be our first stop in that planning effort, so.
And as a group or in?
Us, we were thinking small groups, but.
We need to be in a group.
I think we need to be in a group.
Okay.
I'm just speaking for myself, but when you get us into small groups, we're not nearly as strong as we are when we're together. And I understand the philosophy of taking advantage of that.
No.
But I think we need to,
Yep.
I think we need to kind of collectively weigh in. I may be the outlier on that, or I may be the spear on that one, so.
You could have been in our meetings. That is our approach. Council will be our first stop.
Yeah, we would have to do a work session, make sure we don't violate.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
But not to, if you break us into
And have separate
three little
conversations.
groups. Yeah, I mean, that's what, we end up with this budget, like this. I don't get to hear what Sherry and Brandon and Vicky talked about. I only get to hear what Wally and Laura had to say. So I don't want that to be the same situation when we're talking about strategically planning a multi-million-dollar project that is critical to the city.
Well, maybe we can do the budget different next year.
No, we say that every year.
I know we say it every year, and then we're back there saying, yeah, I know.
Well, to be honest with you, I don't think it turned out that bad. So with that, any other questions?
I have one last thing to say.
Yeah, I do too, so go ahead.
So you're probably sick of me, but, okay. I just want to thank you all for what you've done. This is not easy. I am not a finance person at all, so I respect and I'm in awe of what you come up with. So I thank you for what you've put into this. And I thank our new city manager because she came in the middle of all this. You have taken on a big, big project, and I think you've done a great job for what you had to take on and doing it at the last minute. And you've been terrific to me. I mean, your door is always open, and I thank you for what you're doing. And I thank Andy and Justin also because they're new and I'm new, so we get it. So thank you, everybody who put a lot into this. It really is appreciated. I know we complain, but I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. Bill? So,
Is this for the manager?
you know, Wally, you know, we talked about how do we do it different?
Yep.
We've been here for 3 hours tonight.
Yeah.
We each had an hour meeting, so we have spent 4 hours, which is a little bit more than $100 million an hour on a $600 million budget. I don't know that that's enough public discourse. In the past, we have spent 10, 12, 15 hours overtime talking about it. Perhaps it's not necessary, I don't know, but when we talk about how are we going forward and what are we doing, I mean, we're essentially approved $600 million tonight.
Yeah.
And, 60 slides, so we've got, I'm not even gonna do the math, I'm too tired, but I don't know that, and I don't know the result would have been any different than what we have because the staff has done a wonderful job of putting this together. And I even joked that I may even vote for this one this year. But I think we owe the public more discourse than 3 hours on $600 million.
I agree.
I think we owe them that. Now, we all know we're gonna have a public, maybe we're not this year, maybe we've wised up. We're not gonna have, we have open house, nobody shows up. But at some point, people are gonna start to really care, and we're gonna get complacent, and that is gonna be bad as a city council. So I just make that observation.
I would just like to add a little bit of disagreement there with you, Bill. I like the process. I don't think we have to spend 10 hours to get through this. We hire a city manager and staff when they put in the request. When we sit down, they explain to us what those requests are. I feel confident in the level of employment and the level of people that we have working for us. Trust, if I didn't, I would be with you on all the extra hours. But I think they put together a good budget. I like our fiscal responsibilities as far as our policies are concerned, which I think makes us a very sound running government here. And overall, I thought it was a good process. I do. And I'm not sure more hours would have resulted in anything different on there. But I like the hard work they put in. I appreciate all the hard work you guys put in on this stuff. I know it's being in your position where I was as an employee. I know it's not easy trying to put all this stuff together. But again, I thank you for all your efforts. With that, does the council have any comments or commendations or reports on current events at this time, or are we winding down?
I have something for the city manager.
Okay.
Yesterday,
Well, wait a minute, before you get that, does anybody have any comments you want to add at this point? Are we ready to? All right, Wally, you're up.
thank
Go
you.
for it.
Yesterday, Madam City Manager, I got a phone call from a resident in Figueroa that asked me about the survey, and since I haven't taken the survey, I didn't have an answer for them. And they said they took the survey, they went to submit it, and they had to put in their email address, and they had to do an account, and they said they're not doing it because we're not being transparent. They said they tell us it's an anonymous, but yet we're making them put in an email address to submit it and open an account. So I don't know about it. I don't know why it's not like SurveyMonkey that you just hit send and it goes. And
Hold on.
I didn't have an answer for
Here
them.
you go. Hopefully Jenna.
But they were
with
not
the
very
J has
happy.
an
They were
answer
not
for it.
very complimentary to the city again. So.
Go ahead, Jen.
Mayor and Councilmember Campbell, so just for a quick refresher, with the survey, there are two different pieces to it. We have the statistically valid sample, where residents from throughout the city are randomly selected and sent an invitation to participate. What Councilmember Campbell's referring to is the open or opt-in survey that we publish online, and anyone in Goodyear can take it. So this year, we do require that they provide an email address and also a zip code. That's to verify that the people who are responding are in fact Goodyear residents, and also that they're only taking it once per person.
So that was a recommendation from Polco, the company that we utilized from the survey. I believe most of the other cities who do it have the same practice.
I just tell them, don't bother. If they have heartburn with it, just don't fill it out. Delete it.
Yeah, I can appreciate the fact you
So-
gotta have a ways of not loading it up and 10 people
Yeah.
voting for, you know what I mean, so, yeah.
I did it twice.
Yeah, see, he did, yeah.
It should be
Yeah,
anonymous.
that's
It
right.
should be anonymous if it's anonymous. It should not be, you have to do an account, you have to put in, I mean, I don't mind putting, I mean, I think it's okay to put the zip code, because we've only got 2 zip codes. But I'm not real.
Yeah, but you would vote 5 times with multiple, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I'll call her back tomorrow.
All right. Well, next council meeting, oh,
Mobile zip code.
yeah, that's right.
And we don't even know Mobile's zip codes.
I'm gonna go fill it out from down there.
Yeah. The next council meeting is April 24th at 5 o'clock PM. Without that, no further business. We're done.
I took the